Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Enjoy the fanfic, and let's begin part 2. It was the most interesting sight. None of the Mao's attendants or his servants couldn't take their eyes off the sight. The maids stopped their cleaning. The house workers stopped their yard duties. A few of the butlers didn't move an inch. Everyone's eyes widened to the thing in front of them. A few had their mouths hung open as they watched. Ari and Grimory stood in the corridor and watched the amusing sight with smiles on their faces. Never in anyone's dreams could they have ever fathomed this from their demon king. It was just impossible that the most powerful ruler of their kingdom was actually doing this. It was just not possible. Open wide and say, "Ah, Saya-chan," Naruto said, smiling with a spoonful of bloodied mush. Saya giggled and clapped her small hands while Naruto tried to get her to mimic his open mouth gesture. Ari placed a hand over her mouth while Grimory shook his head. Saya opened her mouth and Naruto placed the food inside. Saya drank the blood from the spoon and laughed while Naruto grinned widely. The biggest news that ran across the regions of Makai, in conjunction with the Mao's return, was the ruler's taking of an orphan vampire child. The fact that this seemed to spread overnight was also an astounding fact. A few silent-mouthed demons theorized that the child was a forsaken one from one of the many vampire clans near the northern region, but that wouldn't have made much sense as vampires were known for having very close family relations and responsibilities. Others theorized that she was the possible breed of a human and vampire. That was something that actually sickened most. What self-respecting demon would dare to procreate with a human? The most outrageous thoughts were to the Mao disappearing for so long to have an affair with a forsaken female vampire, and he took responsibility for the child now. Of course, very few people actually believed that one. However, regardless of any of these theories, none saw fit to deny the child or think bad of it. It wasn't like the child was doing anything that warranted any hatred of her kind. Half or not, she was still a demon. Also, the fact that anyone who thought less was going to be speaking with the Mao deterred anyone from thinking that. All done, Saya-chan. Good girl. Naruto spoke with a smile. Saya giggled at him before reaching out her hands. Naruto blinked before slowly nodding. He reached out his long arms and picked up Saya into his embrace. Saya quickly snuggled into his chest while Naruto wiped off some of his blood from her mouth. He gave a smile before looking up to see everyone looking at him. His eyes slowly narrowed. "What?" he asked. That voice broke everyone from their stupors before they quickly returned to work. Naruto rose an eyebrow at their antics before slowly shaking his head with a small sigh. He then took notice of his mother and his attendant walking down the stairs. Both still had those wide, mischievous smiles across their faces. Naruto didn't even know what to make of it. He was sure, however, that he wasn't going to like it. "I must say, Mao-sama, I never took you for the father type," Grimory spoke, getting Naruto to glance at him. He then looked down at the sleeping vampire girl in his chest and shook his head. "Shut up, Grimory," Naruto retorted, much to the Grimory clan head's amusement. Ari chuckled slightly, her ears twitching every now and then. "Well, all things aside, I do believe that you have a meeting soon, Sochi. Even after all these centuries, I still never understood how you dealt with your council." "Sure, I'm there, but the difference between you and my duties were so different," Ari said. Naruto sighed when he remembered that. For all his wonderings, he had found himself at peace one time in the pocket dimension when he learned that he didn't have to listen to his council for a while. That alone had set him along with a few peaceful hours. However, he was sure that his council had changed. Ari had told him that a few members had been switched over to more her standing, which Naruto didn't go against. Ari was the temporary Mao since she was the only one, in Makai, after the 5 demon guardians, who had power of somewhat comparable level to her sons. Naruto knew this well. Sighing, Grimory and Ari watched Naruto shake his head slowly. "Ka-chan, assemble the council." "Grimory, can you take Saya for a moment?" Naruto asked. Grimory slowly nodded before taking the vampire into his hands. He held her gently before blinking. Grimory felt her warmth as Saya snuggled into his chest. He gave a small frown before it turned into a smile. How long had it been since he held Rias like this? Now his son was a Satan and one of the 4 who, together, had a power equal to the Mao, or so most assumed. I wonder if Venelana would like another one. Sirzex, Rias, and maybe another. Grimory thought to himself. He quickly shook his head when he noticed Naruto and Ari looking at him with knowing smiles. Grimory quickly cleared his throat with a cough before walking along. Naruto laughed and so did Ari. Soon the nine-tailed female disappeared in a swirl of dark, purple flame to go and fulfill her son's wishes. Seeing her nine tails reminded Naruto of something else that he had to do. Naruto walked off. Going through the confines of his house, Naruto came into his private bedroom. He sat on the ground and quickly closed his eyes. Naruto attempted to access his mindscape. Naturally, accessing one's mindscape was virtually impossible as there was truly nothing to focus on physically. Only the simple thoughts of one's person were there, and those weren't real enough to grant access to the mindscape. Actually, when the Mao thought about it, not many people, himself included, knew about the realm of the mindscape, so this was actually a first try, but he was sure that it was possible if only because he had Kyuubi to focus on. He was sure that with his son's chakra flowing through his body, then he would be able to pinpoint him somewhere on the astral plane of minds and meet with him. After some time, Naruto felt a tug on his consciousness. Was this supposed to be the feeling? He wasn't sure, but it was better than nothing. He allowed himself to be taken. Slowly Naruto opened his eyes as he stood in a corridor of halls. Most likely this was his mind, and each of these halls represented a door to a different memory of his or of some time in his life. Naruto walked through the halls. It was somewhat dark and the floor was somewhat wet, but he ignored these things. He turned a corner and then another. He felt like something was guiding him. A voice kept calling him, saying, "Here," or "this way." It was a very weird experience for the blonde Mao, but an experience nonetheless. Finally, after seemingly aimless walking which only sought to irritate Naruto a little more than usual, the blonde finally exited from his place and came into a large room. He smirked when he took notice of the giant bars keeping his son in a confined space. As Naruto walked further to the gates, he felt a rise of slight malicious intent. He didn't move or flinch when giant claws bashed against the bars. If anything, he felt slightly amused by it all. "Is that any way to treat your father, Kyuubi?" Naruto asked, folding his arms. From behind the bars, the form of the nine-tails demon fox came into appearance. His nine tails swayed around in the air while his red eyes narrowed down at the person in front of him. His teeth bared at Naruto while Naruto kept firm to his stance. "Last time I checked, San, you had died to the Rakuto Sennin just after he split us from Jubi. How are you even alive now?" Kyuubi asked, and Naruto frowned. Being reminded of that time quickly took a blow to his pride. Never in his life had he imagined that a human would be powerful enough to seal him away. It was not a pleasant thought. Not to mention the fact that he wasn't even as tall as he used to be. Putting so much power into breaking the remains of the seal had forced him to shorten his height to accommodate. Now I'll admit that the sage caught me off guard. I had not anticipated that he would be able to use holy energy. That by itself is a startling fact. I don't know how he came across that type of power, as only divine beings are supposed to be capable of such. I sealed you inside myself in a way that also allowed you to listen and view my surroundings. You obviously know the entire story from when I told Kami and the Grand Council, Naruto speculated to himself. Kyuubi narrowed his eyes while the Mao did the same. The two seemed to be in silence for a short time before Kyuubi finally spoke. Even though we are separated, I still have some of the Shinju's memories. I believe that when Sage's mother ate some of the fruit, then she gained powers like the demons, since the Jubi is a representation of your power since you created her. Perhaps the sage attained his powers through his mother and through you, Kyuubi theorized. Naruto frowned before snorting. He hated to admit that his son had a point and that this was all some sort of karma backlash, but he doubted that he could see it that way. Kyuubi, I don't know if you have forgotten, but you should know that the Mao doesn't wield holy energy. It's unlikely for one to have holy energy and demon energy at the same time. The two are natural opposites, Naruto said, and Kyuubi slowly nodded, though Naruto knew that it showed on the large fox's face that he didn't completely believe him in that regard. For some reason, Naruto didn't even believe himself, and that was the most troubling thought. However, Kyuubi watched as Naruto shook his head from the thought. The blonde would have to deal with that later. Anyway, Kurama, where are the others? Naruto asked, and Kyuubi frowned. His tail swirled around and bashed against the bars of his jail cell. Naruto rose an eyebrow at the reaction before Kyuubi looked down at him. Who the hell is Kurama? Kyuubi asked with a small snarl while Naruto countered it with a large one. Oh, that's your name now. Calling you Kyuubi is too formal. Just like Grimori calling me Mao all the time. While I was inside that dimension, I had a lot of time to myself and seeing most of you. I heard the humans give you titles and such. Kyuubi no Yoko, the nine-tailed demon fox. Normally I would be more apprehensive about anyone using the name demon of any sort for our race, but I suppose that title holds value to you. No one seemed to call you real names, so I'm going to resolve to give you names of your own, Naruto said with a smile. Kyuubi quickly raised an eyebrow before finally snorting. He then laid his hands on his paws before closing his eyes. Whatever, Kyuubi said, and that only served to make Naruto smile even more. Kyuubi took a glance to the Demon King before finally sighing once again for the umpteenth time. So when are you going to let me out of here? Kyuubi asked rather hopefully. Naruto's eyes lit up for a moment before he placed a finger to his chin. He looked at Kyuubi, boring his eyes into his head, which got Naruto to grin, if only a little. Oh, I don't know. While you are my son, I still think you deserve to be punished, Naruto said, and Kurama gawked. The Kyuubi deserved to be punished. What had he done that deserved to be inside this cage, again? What did you say? Kyuubi asked, baring his teeth forward. His face contorted in anger and his yoki flared forward, quickly washing over Naruto's body. Naruto's grin slowly flew downward into a frown. He then balled his fists and, with a wave of his arm, dispelled Kyuubi nearly overpowering yoki with ease. Kyuubi widened his eyes before he noticed Naruto glaring at him. Do that again, Kurama, and I won't be lenient. I said that you deserve to be punished. You might be wondering why, and I'll tell you. I did see your life and how you lived it. Kyuubi, you have caused the destruction of countless human lives and human settlements. I, myself, have complete neutrality to their race. So long as they leave my race alone, then I will not be a threat to them. Watching you tear through their houses, homes, and even killing them has angered me. I can't believe that you would do that. It should come as no surprise to you as why you were feared, Naruto said before Kyuubi snarled. The ninjan race is hardly worth the pitiful effort that you claim it's worth to San. Why do you even allow them to live? You could. Kyuubi widened his eyes and slightly shivered when he noticed Naruto looking at him firmly. Get out of here, monster. You'll never be one of us. Who is that boy? They must be insane to have let him out. He should have died that night. He's nothing but a damn pest to be eliminated. Naruto closed his eyes before placing a finger to his temple. What was that? Some type of vision or dream? The Mao wasn't sure, to be honest. He just realized that he had a very small headache. This crossing into the mindscape must have been getting to him. Obviously, it might have been giving him fake memories or visions of some sort. The blonde folded his arms and shook his head. Even after the centuries, you are still sometimes childish, Kurama. The humans are Kami's work, well, the previous Kami anyway. Even those as powerful as me have to abide by rules, and if those rules are broken, then there is nothing keeping this world together. The divine beings, demon, and humans must learn to coexist, however hard it might be. Just because I can do something doesn't mean that I should. Kurama, you and your siblings have utterly given my race a bad name, and while this type of stigmatism has always been around since the time of Hagoromo's mother, that still doesn't excuse your actions. How did you get so arrogant now? Naruto asked with a sorrowfully look. Kyuubi snarled before he snorted and turned his head away. Naruto watched the action before shaking his head. I'll be back to talk with you later, Naruto said. Kyuubi watched the blonde turn around and begin to fade away. It was then that Kyuubi widened his eyes. You aren't letting me out? Kyuubi asked, and Naruto flipped his head back and his serious expression suddenly turned playful. Oh no, Kurama. While I watched you do these things to the humans, I was thinking of an appropriate punishment for your actions. I'm not heartless, but I am still the one who created you. Hagoromo may have split you from Jubi-chan, but you're still my responsibility, and it's clear to me that you do not know how to act like a respectable demon. Until I deem it fit, you will stay in here. Learn your lesson, Kurama. I don't want to have to isolate you any more than you have already been, Naruto said, and Kyuubi snarled. You're too soft, too San. Kyuubi managed to snarl out. his voice bellowing through the halls just before Naruto faded out of sight, leaving the nine-tailed demon fox alone in his cage, his punishment. Kyuubi growled before thrashing his tails heatedly to the bars barring his freedom. In his tirade, Kyuubi's claws grabbed at the ground in anger. What did his two-san know anyway? So what if he was trapped in a dimension for those years? It wasn't like he experienced all the damn things those ninja had done. But this treatment wasn't fair. Naruto opened his eyes when his ears heard a knock on the door. Standing to his feet, he effortlessly opened the door to see a demoness quickly compose herself. Mao-sama, the council has been assembled and is waiting for your appearance. Grimori-sama also told me that the four Satans would be there as well, she said. Naruto gave a small glare before it quickly turned blank. The demoness, for all her life, wasn't able to read the expression on his face before Naruto nodded. Thank you. I'll be going, Naruto said. The demoness quickly bowed before she watched in surprise as Naruto disappeared in a swirl of dark purple flame. Konoha, with Kushina. Kushina quickly came through the door of her apartment. Her very lonely apartment, and dropped her grocery bags to the floor. Sitting on the couch, she leaned her vibrant red hair back, allowing it to nearly fall to the ground from its sheer length. For Kushina, it was funny. You never realize what you have until it's gone. Never in her life had Kushina found herself reminiscing about Minato. Kushina didn't regret her choice to not be with Minato. She thought that they could only be friends and he wanted things that she just wasn't ready for. Or maybe it was that she was too scared to try. Kushina wasn't sure. Minato was gone and there was no bringing him back. Now I've depressed myself. Databane, Kushina said to herself. She quickly reached for her remote and turned on her TV. There seemed to be a commercial about stupid bars of soap before Kushina stood to her feet. The habanero redhead quickly craned her neck with help from her hands. She was sure that she was stiffer than a board. She did feel a little uptight. Then again, Kushina felt that she had reason enough to be. In conjunction with Minato's death, there was also problems with her friend, Uchiha Makoto, and that man, Naruto Uzumaki. Kushina held a bottle of water to her lips in reminiscence. How could she forget that presence a day ago? It was truly the most overwhelming presence that she had ever felt before. No one, not even the Sandame, held this demonic, kingly aura that she felt. He definitely wasn't taller than her, just about the same height she figured. It was strange how his blonde hair had the exact spiky composition just like Minato's. It was rather strange. And then there was his deep, bright, blue eyes that just made you feel like you were drowning in a vast sea of power. It was such an exquisite feeling. Kushina widened her eyes before shaking her head. Damn it, now wasn't the time to act like that. This was man who had something to do with her friend's death and herself, since he now held the Kyuubi inside himself. Kushina could help but shudder at the mere thought. Someone, this person not even aligned to Konoha, was out in the world with the most powerful Biju held inside him, and there hadn't been a single sighting of the man in the last few hours that she had been awake. Of course she doubted that with the gall he had to actually make it into Konoha, as well as threaten the council that he would lay low for a while, but Kushina couldn't help but think that with his level of aura then there would be no need for such a thing. However, Kushina couldn't help but ponder his words that time. What did he mean when he said that he wondered if he could call rights on his last name? He claimed that he was a Uzumaki, but he wasn't related to her. Was he perhaps a long-distance cousin? No, Kushina doubted that much. There was something about him. It was like she recognized him at some point. She was sure of it. In her fear, anger, and tiredness back in the council room, she didn't realize it, but she could feel something between the both of them. It was faint, borderline disappearing, but it was there. Kushina had never been one to second-guess herself, especially since she was formerly one of Konoha's top Anbu. Shaking her head, Kushina snorted. Well, I can't let him bother me. Next time I see him I'll get my answers, Databane. Then I will find some way to seal the Kyuubi back into me. He obviously did something that allowed him to seal the Kyuubi into him without destroying his chakra coils. Mito Bachan did the same thing, Kushina said to herself. Suffice to say that the redhead habanero had easily encountered a problem she never had before was an understatement. Yo, that look doesn't suit your pretty face, Kushi-chan. Kushina narrowed her eyes before sighing. Can't you come through the door like a normal person? Ero Senin. Kushina said with a small smile as she turned around to see her window open and a tall man with waist-length spiky white hair leaning his body on her window sill. He wore a red haori over top a dark green shirt kimono with matching pants. His feet clattered across Kushina's wooden floor revealing his wooden sandals. "You're still going to call me that, are you?" he asked while Kushina chuckled to herself. "You're lucky that's all I call you. If you aren't satisfied with that then I can call you worse Databane," Kushina said with a wide smile. She heard the sound of a snort come from the man before she laughed. She reached out her arms and brought the man into a tight hug. A pervert he was, but a better friend he was than that. "It's good to see you, Jiraiya," Kushina said, releasing the hug, and Jiraiya took a step back. He watched Kushina hand him a cup of tea that he graciously accepted before sitting himself down on her couch. Kushina decided to take her own cup and lean against the wall. "I wish I could say the same thing for the village. It truly has seen better days. I wish I could have been here to protect it, but you never see things like this coming," Jiraiya said, and Kushina nodded, taking a sip of her tea. "It was a little too hot. I suppose that's true. And now someone's walking around with the Kyuubi sealed inside him and we have no idea where he is," Kushina said with a sigh. Jiraiya's face took on a grim expression as he hunched forward. "Yeah, Sarutobi-sensei told me about that. There is a lot of speculation going around, but as far as civilians are concerned then the Kyuubi was defeated in the aftermath, but for those Jonin and above they know the truth. Sensei just released Hunter Nin to take care of the problem. I'm sure this guy will turn up soon." "What was his name?" Jiraiya asked, and Kushina chuckled dryly. "He said he was Uzumaki Naruto Databane," Kushina replied. Jiraiya's eyebrow quickly raised to her statement as he proceeded to fold his arms. "Uzumaki. Your clan. A survivor?" he asked, and Kushina quickly shook his head back and forth, denying it all. "Jiraiya, you weren't there. He said that he's not related to my clan in any way, and his aura. It trumps your own and Hokage-sama's. I'm not sure if that happened after he took Kyuubi, but I'm unsure," Kushina said, and Jiraiya frowned. Jiraiya didn't mean to toot his own horn, but he figured that he was definitely one of the strongest shinobi in the world to date. How could someone as strong as what Kushina was describing go unnoticed to anyone, especially Jiraiya given the Sanin's spy network? "Well, I got his description from Sarutobi-sensei, so he'll turn up quickly, I'm sure." "How are you feeling?" Jiraiya asked. Kushina sighed and slumped to the ground. "If I had to be honest then I would say that I feel terrible. The doctors said I shouldn't even be walking around, but I'll be damned if I stay in a hospital," Kushina said with a huff. Jiraiya quickly laughed while he rubbed the top of his scalp. "I still don't understand your hatred of hospitals, and I doubt I ever will. Kami, if you had a son I bet he would be just like you," Jiraiya said, and he noticed Kushina quickly frown. The redhead slowly began to withdraw into herself. "Kushina?" Jiraiya asked, and Kushina closed her eyes. "I don't understand those who want children. Maybe it's because I have never been a parent, but I could tell that Minato wanted to be a dad. I couldn't see it for myself. Taking care of one, I mean. I don't get it, Databane," Kushina said, and Jiraiya's face quickly turned neutral. "I get what you're saying, but I sort of understand Minato more. All my life I've truly tried to get Tsunade to be with me. True, she's very beautiful, and her man, those are every man's dream, but I can't see myself having a family with anyone else but her. She might not feel the same way, but that's how I feel," Jiraiya said, getting Kushina to glance at him. "Wow, so even you can say deep things every once in a while, Ero Sennin. Though I'm sure what would help you is if you gave up that little hobby of yours," Kushina said with a smile. Jiraiya's grin could only possibly increase before he stood to his feet, downed his tea, and placed the cup on the wall. "Not even Tsunade Senju can put a halt to research," Jiraiya said, and dashed out of the window. Kushina shook her head and sighed. Still the same old pervert. She never understood his books, but she wasn't about to go chase him. For once, the redhead habanero was all out of energy to do anything. Konoha. Underground. If it were even possible for Danzo to frown any more than how he was now, then he would have done it. In front of the elderly council member of Konoha was 3 teens who could be no more than 13. Each of them held the standard black and gray Anbu armor and animal mask. Each had their heads to the ground low. "Repeat what you stated," Danzo stated firmly. There wasn't any irritation in his voice or even any anger, but for those who had a better understanding of how the man thought, which was a very, very select few, they would know that he was not taking this news very well. Danzo-sama, we have not uncovered the location of one, Uzumaki Naruto, as of yet. We believe that due to the fact that he has been seen before the council along with how confident he was then he won't be showing himself anytime soon. We accept any reprimands for this mission, sir. The young Anbu said, and Danzo slowly turned his back to the three of the young Anbu members. His eyes gazed at a lasting fire. Its flames burned the logs in their place as the small sounds of cackling could be heard. Leave. You will be given punishment in due time, Danzo said, and he quickly felt their presence's face without any complaint to his wishes. Now that they had left, Danzo released a sigh and took a deep breath. He closed his eyes for a little while. It couldn't make much sense. How could someone with this kind of aura go unnoticed for so long? Danzo had his Anbu search bingo books that spanned even before his age. He didn't know why, but the way the blonde young man held himself then, there was no way that he was younger than he seemed. However, every search on him turned to be nothing, as there was not one claim of there being an Uzumaki Naruto. How could someone so strong have gone through anyone's notice for whoever knows how long? Snapping his fingers, Danzo felt one of his Anbu drop to the ground on one knee. "Hi, Danzo-sama," he said. The young man had whitish gray hair. His face being covered by a mask, it was the only thing that kept his features different. He wore the same armor, the same tanto. The only things different were his mask and his hair, nothing else. Every feature was plain. "I have a mission for you. Do not fail me. The integrity of Konoha is in jeopardy. You will make a life for yourself in each of the nations. You will go to Kurigakure and live there for exactly 1 year, then you will move to Iwagakure for the same amount of time, and then to Sunagakure, and finally Kumogakure. During these times you will report back to Konohagakure on your progress. Your mission: integrate yourself into their forces and discover the existence of one who calls himself Uzumaki Naruto. Be discreet and track him. If you find him, do not engage. Alert Konoha to his location. The safety of Konoha and the return of its power is in your hands. Do not fail route," Danzo said, and the young man quickly bowed. "Hi, Danzo-sama," he said before he quickly vanished out of sight once again, leaving Danzo alone. The elder didn't know what to make of the blonde's words. Was he truly the one who created the Kyuubi? No, that was impossible. There was no way that this young man could have done something so complex, and even then it defied all logic. The Kyuubi had been around even before the time of Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha. Now Danzo realized that nothing was out of the realm of possibility, but the odds of this young man being able to accomplish such feats was damn near improbable. Danzo didn't know what to make of it, but he knew one thing. The Kyuubi was not in Konoha's hands. Now every village had a Jinchuriki except for Konoha, and add this to the fact that Konoha had nearly been destroyed, then it wasn't looking good for Danzo. He couldn't let this continue. Konoha had to come out on top. It just had to. Makai Council Room. The Makai Council was one of the most talked about places. Demons that only the Mao hand-picked personally were allowed on such a seat of power. The council's authority ran its veins deep into the very core of demon history. It was a surprise to no one that when Naruto had disappeared that the council would change, with Ari having taken the temporary seat. Granted, not many of the members that Naruto had picked had changed, but ideals and individualism were becoming a steady rise. The council consisted of mainly 3 areas, or of people who the Mao confided in. The first of the area was the 4 positions of the 4 great Satans. All 4 seats were swiftly taken by the current 4. Sears X Lucifer, formerly Sears X Grimori, Seraphol Leviathan, Ajuka Beelzebub, and Falbium Asmodeus. Each of these great Satans came from 4 of Makai's prestigious clans: Grimori, Citri, Astaroth, and Glacia Labelas. The duty or role of the 4 great Satans was to not only help handle internal affairs of Makai, but also deal with Mao-level threats if the need ever arose. Most demons liked to rumor that the 4 great Satan together had power of equal to the Mao, and it was suffice to say that this wasn't far from the truth. The first 4 great Satans were easily comparable in power to the Mao. There was only one thing that truly made them inferior, one very small thing. However, since threats of the Mao's level were not a common occurrence, then there wasn't much of a need for them to intervene much. The only ones who could match the 4 great Satans were the Mao's former elite guard, the Archfiends, and the three Dark Lords. Just like Grimoire, Searsex had his father's red hair. It flowed down his back like a river of blood until it dropped to the back of his waist. Just like his father, he held a high-class appearance, though not as elegant as Grimoire's. His face held the smooth, yet firm features that made him the object of desire for a number of females, but sadly for most he was already married. Searsex offered a small smile as he sat in his seat. His eyes scanned left and right his peers with a gentle smile on his face. Next to Searsex was a very happy Satan, Seraphal Leviathan, in her seat. She was a beautiful girl with long, black hair tied in twin ponytails and violet eyes. For most of those present it wasn't much of a surprise what she wore. She wore very unorthodox clothing, but not many complained about it since her interests of clothing never got in the way of her duties, though that never stopped her from having fun every now and then. Next to her was Ajuka Beelzebub. Ajuka had black hair that didn't go so far down as Searsex, but it was still a significant length. The sides of his black hair went down in the form of silky bangs. Most ended to think that the man was strange from the way his aura was. It wasn't nearly as overpowering on its own when compared to the Mao's, but it was mysterious for one reason or another. No one could put their thoughts to it. Ajuka's interests were in the creation of things. Whatever he could make, he was happy if he could do it. Which was why Ari named him as the head of Makai's technical departments. Lastly to him was the sound of someone lightly sleeping. The council members sighed as they watched Falbium Asmodeus sleep in his seat. Falbium, in contrast to Ajuka, had short black hair. His body slumped to his seat as his chest rose and fell. A lot wondered why Ari had placed him on a seat with Makai's military affairs. However, those who knew him knew exactly why she had done so. The one reason was because of his intelligence. Never in Ari's life had she seen a demon with so much aptitude in the mental arts than Falbium. He might have been lazy, but he was the smartest demon that one would come across. These were the four that made up the first section of the Mao's council. The second section was comprised of 3 people. It was actually a surprise to 3 of the 4 great Satans, but then again the news of Makai's original Mao's return was a widespread thing and one that they had trouble believing. Of course, none of the 4 had seen the Mao in person since they were all children at the time. The 3 Satans eyed Ari, mother of the Mao, Issa Shuzan, leader of the Shuzan clan of vampires, and Searsex, father, Grimoire, also known to others as the Mao's queen in his peerage. The 3 concentrated their attention on the sleeping baby in Ari's arms. They watched as Ari smiled and gently moved her arms back and forth, allowing the child to sleep easily. Saya gave a small yawn before curling up further into Ari's soft tails. Ari gave another smile when she took notice of 3 of the 4 great Satans looking at her in surprise. Ari, Grimoire, and Issa represented the Mao's demon community. Demon civilians who had complaints or problems took them to those 3, which were then passed on to the Mao. Not that people couldn't come to him personally if they had problems, but being in front of the most powerful demon was more than a little intimidating. The last sect of the Mao's council were the Dark Lords. There were 3 seats there and all 2 people were there. Tenmei Mikogami, and Toho Fuai, and Akasha Bloodriver. Issa and Akasha exchanged a glance. The 2 glared at each other before finally acknowledging the other, then broke the staring. The atmosphere around the room grew tense with the 2 present. It was understandable since the 2 had originally been married until they had a falling out. Akasha remained a Dark Lord while Issa remained the head of the Shuzan family. The Dark Lords were responsible as being the Mao's attendants when he was going to the Grand Council for his meetings. They were the most honored of the demons as they were the 3 that helped keep guard of the Grand Council along with Kami's divine beings. Though now that wasn't the only thing they did since the formation of Yokai Academy, which was made to help young demonic children harness their individual powers and, if they so decided, use those powers in the service of the Mao. The 4 great Satans, Ari, Grimoire, Issa, and the Dark Lords surrounded the large room. So Tan, who is the father if the baby? Seraphal spoke with a large smile on her face. Ari looked up and the others seemed to want to know as well. Well, other than Grimoire and Issa, that is. Unfortunately I don't know Seraphal, Ari replied, and the Satan blinked while Searsex blinked as well. Ajuka frowned slightly before narrowing his eyes at the sight. Are you the mother? Ajuka asked rather directly. Ari's eyebrow twitched slightly before clearing her throat. Would you be surprised if I was? Ari asked tauntingly. Ajuka snorted before folding his arms and looking off in a corner of the room. Ari giggled while Grimoire shook his head slightly. He allowed one of his elbows to rest on the table while he put his head in his hands for leverage. Considering that Ari-sama's reactions to possible suitors ended less than favorable previous times, then we can guess she's not. Searzek spoke, smiling as well. It was certainly strange to Issa to be around this many people smiling, since he hoped for a bit more professionalism, but maybe that was just him in that regard. Issa shook his head and leaned himself back into his comfortable seat. It's not Ari-san's. The baby is of vampire origin, but it is only strange because she does not hold a Yuki that is from the several vampire clans. So until further notice she is considered adopted as the Mao's daughter, Issa said, and the three quickly stayed silent. Akashi, Toho, and Tenmei glanced to each other before looking back at Ari holding the girl named Saya. If that's the case, then Mao-sama will most likely teach her the demonic arts, Akasha answered. Issa slowly nodded and Ari did agree. Now that she was adopted, people were going to be expecting great things from the tiny vampire. Though Ari and Naruto were happy enough if she just tried her best, the rest of the community wouldn't see it that way. Well, you just leave that to Sochi and myself. I'm sure that we'll be fine, Ari said, and everyone nodded, albeit slowly. It was then that the doors opened and those awake turned their eyes to the sight in front of them. Searzek, Serafal and Ajuka slowly widened their eyes as they watched Naruto walk through the chamber. The young blonde grinned slowly. His blue eyes took in the form of the others. He took in the presence, form, and power of Serafal, Ajuka, and Searzek. Naruto slowly nodded to himself before he turned to Falbium, who was still sleeping peacefully. Raising an eyebrow, he continued walking. The three awake Satans noticed the Dark Lords, Ari, Grimoire and Issa stood to their feet and quickly bowed. Grimacing, Searzek, Serafal, and Ajuka jumped to their feet, much to the enjoyment of Naruto. Falbium, get up, Ajuka sternly said, shifting Falbium's body. The sleeping Satan slowly opened his eyes and took into account the room. He noticed the Dark Lords and his fellow Satans. He then took into account Ari, Saya, Issa and Grimoire. Slowly his eyes turned to Naruto, who connected his eyes to him. Falbium twitched slightly at the feeling of demonic aura surrounding the person in front of him. Falbium noticed the others standing to their feet before he lazily stood to his own. Greetings, Mao-sama, the three Dark Lords spoke. Grimoire, Issa and Ari quickly followed after. The four great Satans widened their eyes before they turned to Naruto. The blonde grinned before slowly nodding. He didn't say anything to the four just yet. It had felt strange. Back when he was in Konoha, Naruto couldn't help but feel that their counsel wasn't the same as his own. Well, now wasn't the time to be concerned with the affairs of the humans. It's really great to see all of you again. Well, let's hurry this up. I would like Akasha to finish her mission before too long. If that's alright with you, Akasha-chan, Naruto said, and Akasha quickly shook her head that it wasn't a problem with a gentle smile. Naruto then quickly took his seat and everyone began to seat themselves once again. None said anything for a little while as Naruto tapped his finger on the table. He didn't want to admit it, but he truly hated council meetings. Maybe going back to the pocket dimension wouldn't be so bad if he could avoid these types of things. So the four of you are my current four great Satans now, right? Naruto asked. The four quickly perked up and nodded. That's right, we are Ma-tan, Serafal answered with a smile. The other three glanced to her before they glanced back to Naruto. The blonde looked at her firmly before snickering to himself. Shaking his head slightly towards the four, he then leaned back into his chair. You can all relax. I'm not going to take away your positions, Naruto answered. The four quickly glanced to each other, if only for a brief moment. Looking around the room of the council and seeing the expressions of the Dark Lords, Ari, Grimoire, and Issa Shuzen, the four Satans easily concluded that they were standing too stiff. It was obvious why they were nervous, or at least it was obvious why they seemingly kept fidgeting from time to time. It also didn't help them when they all saw Ari chuckling to herself. Saya gave a small yawn, but didn't stir from her slumber. Mao-sama, we know that the Great Satan position is one that you take seriously. We want you to know that we are willing to do anything to prove to you that we are capable enough to. Searzek quickly stopped when Naruto raised his hand midway into the air. His blue eyes zoned in on their forms and a small smile came across his face. Yes, you will have to prove to me that you earn that position, but I also don't see the need to not let you keep the position because I know Ka-chan and above all else I know I can trust Ka-chan's judgment if it comes to an important decision like this. If she let you have the position then I will trust her judgment Dadbao, Naruto answered taking a glance to his mother. Ari smiled quickly in return before Naruto went to other things. Now then, how did Vazda go rogue? Naruto asked rather firmly. Everyone in the room winced at his tone. For a while no one said anything as they were afraid to speak on the matter. Ever since the reason for Vazda's leaving, Makai had questioned this incident. It was widely known that Vazda, though with somewhat good intentions towards his demon race, was unnaturally obsessed with the human world. Or more like he was obsessed with making it a territory for the demons. Ari had noticed that almost as soon as Naruto disappeared, Vazda had assembled the council for the purpose of seeking out a temporary Mao. At the time, Ari had been at her very lowest when Naruto hadn't returned. Her sorrow and worry had taken a full hold over her body. However, Ari had just enough strength of will and faith in her son that she still attended the council meetings. She figured it would make her son happy if she did. Vazda was the one who nominated himself to take over Naruto's position at least for the time being. The four great Satans of that time had expressed a small disapproval of his nomination if only for the reason of the title that he already possessed, which was that of the Archfiend Dark Lord. A rule for Makai was that you couldn't hold two positions at one time. If you wanted to be one thing then you had to leave the other. The only exception to that rule was the four great Satans and the council members, for you had to have one position to have another. To be the director of military affairs, you had to be a Satan, or to be a director in the technology department you had to be a Satan. Things such as these were exceptions. What Vazda was wanting was not an exception. By a unanimous vote, the council agreed that Vazda would stay where he was and Ari would take the job since she didn't have a current position, but still had the power that was only slightly off in comparison to Naruto's. Ari handled it well. She took the position without much complaint, her only exception being that she was to be addressed as the temporary Mao, which everyone agreed. Shortly after that, for unknown reasons, Vazda left Makai along with his sect of demons known as fiends. Since then, there hadn't been a word from Vazda in those centuries that Naruto was gone. Naruto, himself, was listening to their story intently. It was obvious that to him that his mother wanted to go after Vazda, but circumstances stopped her from doing so, specifically his disappearance. From what we know, he and a significant portion of the fiends left. We just know that he displays an interest in the demon statue, Akasha answered. Naruto frowned and quickly placed a finger to his chin. As much as he would rather not, he had to bring that to Kami and Michael during the next meeting. The demon statue was no laughing matter. All right then. Anyway, I also want to make everyone clear. Makai will have to intervene in the human realm a little more, Naruto answered. Everyone quickly perked up at that information. Ari seemed to clutch Saya's body a little more possessively and everyone steeled their gaze. Mao-sama, for what purpose must this be done? Not that I do not trust your judgment in matters, but I must express my concern. Back when Yokai Academy was created, we all learned demon history. We learned what happened when humans and demons tried to coexist. It's why you created the Shinju in the first place, correct? Ajuka asked. Naruto nodded quickly, still not very pleased with that certain century. I do not believe it would be wise to subject the race to that once again, but I will await your orders, the Beelzebub Satan remarked. Naruto looked to him if only for a moment before nodding. Thank you, Ajuka-san. Never feel that you can't offer your opinion to me. Now as to why, well, it would be better if I showed you and told you, Naruto said and proceeded to take off his cloak and then his shirt. Akasha, Seraphal, and Ari quickly averted their gazes for a second, much to Naruto's impish joy. The others didn't look away before Naruto called the three ladies to attention. They slowly turned back and all eyes were focused on the seal to his stomach. What do you all see this as? Naruto asked. Falbium and Tenmei narrowed their eyes slightly, but neither said anything. Grimori and Issa stayed silent also, but their minds were racing. Ari tilted her head to the side and Seraphal seemed to follow her example. Well, obviously it's a seal, Mao-sama. The humans call it Fuinjutsu, I believe. But what does that have to do with you? Searzex asked. Naruto slowly nodded to the red-headed Satan before sighing. I see you all as my friends, and I think I can tell you this in confidence that you won't think less of me. I had underestimated Hagoromo Otsutsuki and was sealed into a pocket dimension. It was well crafted enough to hold me there for some time. While it sent me there, I could view the human world for as long as I wanted. The sage split the Shinju, Naruto said. The others widened their eyes quickly. But how? The Shinju is made of pure Yuki. A human shouldn't be able to do that, Toho quickly assessed. Naruto nodded and the others nodded in agreement. However, you are to also remember that humans have a less concentrated form of Yuki in their bodies known as chakra. Chakra can split Yuki if you're experienced enough in it. The sage managed to split the Shinju into 9 beings. When my Shinju had its fruit stolen, I named it the Jubi to teach the humans a lesson. From the Jubi came these 9 beings: Ikibi, Nibi, Sanbi, Yonbi, Gobi, Rokubi, Nanabi, Hachibi, and Kyubi. Together they make up the Jubi and people refer to them as Biju, Naruto answered. Everyone fell silent for a moment. If they are from the Shinju, then wouldn't that imply that they are demons as well? Grimory asked. Naruto turned to glance at the head of the Grimory clan before nodding. That they are. However, they live in the human realm, and the reason I say this is because I know that each of them is sealed. 8 of them are sealed within humans. This sealing allows the human to have access to demonic powers like ours. They call themselves Jinchuriki, Naruto replied. Power of human sacrifice, huh? Seems appropriate. So once you assemble them, then you're going to bring the Shinju back? Falbium asked rather tiredly. Naruto surprised nearly everyone when he shook his head. Not yet. They each have sins that need to be atoned against the humans. I will retrieve them, but putting them back to Jubi-chan can wait a little longer. Each of the nations has at least 1, some have 2. Hey, maybe I should say that now only 4 have Jinchuriki, Naruto answered. Hold on, Ma-tan. You said that the nations had 8, where is the 9th? Hugh-chan. Seraphol asked. Naruto smirked when he heard the slight growl coming from Kyuubi's mouth. That's a good name for you, Hugh-chan. Naruto teased. Kurama growled a little more before slowly turning silent. It was obvious what he thought of the name. That is not funny too, San. I am the great Kyuubi no Yoko. I'm not a child. Kyuubi snarled out between his teeth. Naruto's smile seemed to widen a little more before bringing himself to answer Seraphol's question. Raising a finger, the council watched as Naruto slowly pointed his way downward until it rested to the tip of his navel. Everyone concentrated on where his finger was pointed before they finally figured it out, and the shock on their faces matched their realizations. But, how? The head of the Shuzen family asked, and Naruto scratched the back of his head. Well, let's say that I had a run-in with the humans of the village known as Konohagakure. I met their Yondaime. Their village was attacked by Kurama. He was sealed within the human, Kushina Uzumaki, Naruto said before everyone took a pause. Uzumaki. She has your last name, Mausama? Grimory asked, and Naruto shook his head. Trust me, I don't know either. I wasn't there for the clan's creation, but they're known as the Uzumaki clan. They're a special clan. They also hold an unnatural obsession with our race, Naruto warned rather than stated. Naruto could feel the unpleasantness inside everyone from their reactions to that news. It was never a good deal when humans became interested in demons. So it stands to reason that they wish to know something about us, we just don't know what. Well, anyway, please continue, Mausama, Akasha replied, to which Naruto readily agreed. Anyway, Kurama was unsealed from Kushina by one member of the Uchiha clan. He took control of Kyuubi with their dojutsu, the Sharingan. You should all have a fairly good idea of it since Jubi-chan had something like it. Anyway, long story short, Yondaime tried to seal Kyuubi into Saya-chan there. I intervened, he died, and I'm stuck with one of 8 Biju in my stomach. Better? Naruto asked. The others slowly nodded, coming to understand the situation. Did you and this Yondaime fight? Toho asked. For most of them it was sort of laughable if their Mao was defeated by a human, but they also remembered that he had been overconfident just before he got sealed. If he could be sealed, then the same could be said for them just as easily. Naruto turned back to Toho to find the Dark Lord rather captivated by the story itself. Naruto supposed he could understand why. This was hardly the ordinary circumstance, and even then it was more of a surprising issue rather than a controversial one. No, we didn't fight. We had a very brief chat, but nothing else. He somehow managed to summon Shinigami-san, Naruto replied. No one seemed particularly fazed by that news, or if they did then they were experts at hiding it. So I am of the assumption that you do not wish for the Biju, which are more or less your children, to be held by the humans anymore. Ari asked and Naruto nodded quickly. He could see where everyone was beginning to come to his understanding of what he meant when he said he needed to come into a closer proximity with humans. No one could refute the dangers of demons like the Biju if they were in human hands. Slowly the others nodded in agreement. Ma-tan, what do you wish to do? Seraphal asked, raising her hands, prompting Naruto to turn his head to her slightly. What I want, Sarah-chan, is to get them back. Unfortunately, I may have given Konoha a reason to target me. Now I'm not particularly worried about such a thing, but rather I feel that once my existence is confirmed in their world, then they will no doubt try to gather Kurama back from me. None of you have to come with me if you do not want to, Naruto replied. Everyone quickly perked up. We were going with you. Falbium asked and Naruto quickly nodded. That's right. I'm sorry to request this from any of you, but I want you all to consider bringing your families and clans with you when you move. We're going to be spending a long time in the human realm and I need all of you, Naruto answered. Everyone quickly glanced to each other before Grimoire spoke. The Grimoire clan's role is to serve the Mao for all eternity. We will follow you wherever you go, Mao-sama, the Grimoire head replied. Searzek eyed his father before giving a wide smile and nodding in turn. Well, that's all fine and good, Mao-sama, but who is going to run Makai? Forgive me for saying, but your absence has left a rather large void in Makai's heart. I don't think the people would be overjoyed to learn of your travels or objectives so soon, especially not since you only came back yesterday, Ajuka responded. The three Dark Lords easily agreed with the Beelzebub Satan in what he was talking about. They had all worked hard with Ari to maintain stability, and those were trying centuries. Having the original Mao back had quickly placed a sort of lid of authority over Makai, and if people learned he was leaving again, then no doubt the actions and rants would increase. I have an idea for that too. Don't worry about that, Dadbao. Just have your things ready as soon as you can if you agree to go, Naruto said, looking at the others. Everyone nodded and Naruto dismissed his council. Walking over to his mother, he slowly picked up the now awakened Saya into his arms. Saya giggled quickly before grabbing his cloak. Naruto smiled as everyone began to file out. Sochi, you know I trust you, but are you sure you really want to be in so close proximity to humans again? Ari asked worriedly. She really didn't want her son stressing himself. Mao or not, he could still get tired just like everyone else, and also like everyone else, if the circumstances were right, he could even die. The mere thought of Naruto dying to a human literally tore at Ari's heart, but she pushed the thoughts down. Naruto quickly turned before kissing his mother over her forehead. Ari's ears perked up and her tail sagged slightly in happiness. Ari involuntarily purred while her eyelids dropped. It will be all right, Ka-chan. I promise, Naruto said before walking out while Ari huffed. Damn it, he always gets his way whenever he does that to me. Ari said to herself before she quickly followed after her son. Grimoire household. Grimoire quickly came through the door to his mansion. His feet echoed through his house before one of his demoness maids quickly came. It is a pleasure to receive you, Grimoire-sama, the maid stated to the Grimoire head. Grimoire slowly gave a small smile before letting his signature smile make its way across his face. Thank you, Ma-chan. Ma, tell the servants around the house to be prepared. I'm going to have Mao-sama prepare to transport our household. We will be living in the human realm for a time, Grimoire said, both for passing information as well as judging his attendant's reaction. Ma, more known as Mai, slowly raised an eyebrow, but she quickly nodded with a bow. If it wasn't for her to know, then it wasn't important to her services. Understood, Grimoire-sama. Shall I inform Venelana-sama of this as well? She asked. Grimoire couldn't stop the warm smile on his face once he thought of his wife. No, that will be all right. It would be best if I told her myself, Grimoire answered. The maid, Mai, acknowledged his order before going off to tell the maid and servants her lord's orders. Grimoire watched her go off before he began his ascent up the stairs. Here was the house that was inherited to him from former Grimoires. If Grimoire were honest with himself, Then he couldn't help but slowly find himself intrigued by the human world. This would allow for him to follow up on a small hobby of his, observation. Grimory loved observing things and even trying new things. He wondered if his wife would feel the same. After walking through his house, Grimory stopped at a door. He quickly knocked on it slowly. "Come in," came a soft, quite melodious voice. Grimory opened the door to Venelana's room and walked inside. He offered a smirk. There was his wife kneeling on the floor playing with their youngest child. Grimory first took into account his wife, Venelana Grimory. Formerly known as Venelana Bale, coming from the Bale clan, she was the eldest daughter of the Bale clan. Throughout Makai, her name was well known, and not just for her looks or her position as Grimory's wife, but rather also for her strength. To all, she was known as the brunette Madam of Extinction for her deadly use in her clan's special ability known throughout Demonkind as Power of Destruction. The ability was strangely only able to be used by those of the Bale clan. Not even the Mao was able to learn it. It was only something that this clan could learn, which was still a mystery of why to even this day. Well, anyway, Grimory got sidetracked. Unlike his hair, her hair was brown. She wore a high-class blouse covering her ample assets. Around her neck was a necklace that Grimory had gotten her for her birthday. She had a soft smile on her face. Then Grimory turned his head to his youngest daughter. Here was Rias Grimory, second child of Grimory and Venelana. Grimory smiled. Rias had her father's hair, but his mother beautiful features. Grimory watched Rias play around her mother. She couldn't have been any older or any younger than Saya, unless by maybe a few months. Grimory walked over to both his women before sitting himself next to his wife. "She's still small," Grimory said, and Venelana quickly nodded. She then proceeded to kiss his cheek much to his comfort. "How was the meeting?" Venelana asked, getting straight to the point. That was something Grimory just couldn't take out of her. She was always straightforward, not that he didn't like that about her. Sometimes it helped to not beat around the bush, but maybe that was just him and her. It went as it could have been expected. Mao-sama had a brief encounter with Makai's current Satans and he seems pleased. He's officially taken the young unknown vampire as his adopted daughter, Grimory said as they watched Rias laugh to herself. They didn't know what was going on in her head. "I'm heard. Word tends to travel around here fast. Though I take it that the reason you are home so early is because this meeting has something to do with us?" Venelana asked, and Grimory slowly nodded. He held out his arms and he watched Rias slowly make her way towards him before landing herself into his lap. Grimory brushed his large hand through the hair that she had before speaking. "Mao-sama has asked for most of the clans to be relocated to the human realm for a time," Grimory said, slowly studying his wife. He turned his head and he noticed Venelana looking at him firmly. He stared back at her just as firmly. The two seemed to be having an internal debate with each other, and Venelana proceeded to break the staring contest to look down to her daughter. "Might I ask why?" Venelana asked. She had been to the human realm before on plenty of missions. She didn't know how they changed in that time. Venelana held no malice, hostility or vengeance against them. They feared what they didn't understand, but it was also that fear of why she wasn't sure. To have her daughter over there with humans growing up. It wasn't a pleasant feeling. Mao-sama says that things are moving in motion from what he's noticed in their ways while he was gone. Venelana, the humans have the possession of 9 demons, and if they keep them, then Mao-sama fears for not just our world, but for the order of all 3 worlds. We do not have to relocate. He has given us that choice. You, Rias, and the Grimory household can stay here. I will go and help Mao-sama if that is what you want. I promised him my life, and as Naruto's attendant I will not fail him. The last thing I need or want is for you to be unhappy," Grimory stated. Venelana twitched slightly while she brushed a hand over Rias's face. They watched Rias slowly fall asleep with a yawn. "When we married, I vowed to stay beside you. I will not break that commitment now, if ever. We may relocate at your leisure, but I will keep Rias safe from all threats, human or otherwise. I also trust Naruto-kun. We are all friends, so I will trust you both to know that this is right. I will help prepare the sealing formula," Venelana said, getting to her feet. She walked out of the room while Grimory sighed. That could have gone better, but at least his wife was on board, and right now that was all he wanted. All he wanted was her support. He looked down to the sleeping Rias and grinned. "We're going to have a one-of-a-kind adventure, Rias. I promise that I will also keep you safe from anything, Grimory said to his sleeping daughter. Rias's response was simply to bury herself into his clothing, much to Grimory's silent joy. Shuzan household. And that is why we're leaving for the human realm. Have the house prepared for relocation. We leave tomorrow, Issa quickly spoke. There seated at the table was his family. His wife Gyokuro Shuzan and his 4 daughters, Akua Shuzan, Kalua Shuzan, Moka Akashiya, and Kakoa Shuzan. Why should we have to interact with humans? Aren't they the ones who forced us out anyway? Kakoa asked heatedly. The other 3 daughters remained silent, though the look on Kalua made him tense for some reason. Well, it was probably nothing. Kakoa, remember yourself. No one is saying that you have to interact with them. However, our presence is needed for Mao-sama to conduct his business, and the Shuzan family lives to serve Mao-sama. All of you understand that. I will prepare the seals to move the clan. I do not know how long we will be there, so I expect you all to keep yourself as one would expect of the Shuzan family, Issa replied. Kakoa huffed, but nodded, and everyone else did the same. Gyokuro sipped her tea without so much of a word of complaint. Issa then dismissed his family and walked off, as did the daughters, leaving Gyokuro alone. Gyokuro slowly smiled. Mao-sama, you really have been away a long time, yet you still haven't changed. The world does not need humans in order to have order. There must only be Makai. You might be the strongest, but even you make mistakes, and when you do, Fairy Tail will not hesitate to correct your mistakes with the destruction of the human race, Gyokuro said to herself with a smile that didn't quite match those words. Oh no, it wasn't that Venelana hated humans. She merely wanted them to learn their place, and that place is to be as a stool for Demunkand, nothing more, but they could be less. However, the only thing that she felt was different from her and Vazda was that she didn't want to war with Kami. No, she just wanted the earth for her race. However, she hated to admit it, but she wasn't close to power when it came to Naruto. She needed a lot more. Well, let's see where this adventure takes us, Mao-sama. She asked at nobody before standing up and walking off gracefully, just like she had been brought up to do. Mao Mansion. Naruto sat on his bed watching Saya play with the toys he had given her. The unknown vampire child seemed to really gravitate towards Naruto's person. It was odd, especially since vampires, such as those of the Shuzan clan, were more able to identify their parents. It was supposed to be an innate ability for a vampire to know their parents in some shape or form. Even vampire children were able to identify parents even if they hadn't seen them for a good century or so. It confused the Mao about her. But he couldn't just leave her alone. However, he had to wonder, was he doing right by this? Yes, he desired to go and get the Biju before the humans did something stupid with them, as he found that race generally did, but he also had to look out for his most recent daughter. Would it really do good for her, him, his mother, and the rest of the Makai community if he went to the human realm? I wish this were simple, Saya-chan. I really do. Not to mention Konoha probably knows my face. I also know Kami-chan's going to try and interfere. She always does, Naruto said. Saya merely smiled at him before pushing the toys over his bed and climbing into his lap. Naruto smiled slightly before he watched her try to dig herself into his body. Naruto slowly picked up her tiny body before sighing. Quickly taking a cup that had been on his nightstand, he held it in his hands and then pressed it to Saya's lips. The intoxicating smell filled Saya's nose and she slowly drank the red liquid much to her delight. Naruto watched her drink his blood from the cup. Naruto doubted her teeth were strong enough to bite into his skin just yet. But from her joy, it might seem possible that his blood was good, or at least good to her. Once both were finished, Naruto slowly patted Saya's back. Saya quickly belched before giggling. Naruto chuckled softly before putting her near his face. Saya raised her hands and touched Naruto's face with her hands, memorizing his features. To think I almost left you alone. Forgive me, Saya-chan, Naruto said. Saya offered a small smile in return. Naruto slowly nodded before placing Saya in her cradle. He slowly watched Saya fall asleep. Naruto grinned to himself before feeling the presence of someone behind him. Mao-sama, you asked for me? He asked. The man was fairly tall and pale-skinned. He held a somewhat middle-aged appearance of about 25 years on the average male of the humans. His black hair was thrown back into a ponytail, though some of that hair consisted of bangs that fell down his face. He wore a black kimono with a black waist strap. Along his back was a long sword. Hagi, take Saya-chan back to her room. I'm leaving you as her personal guardian while we're in Makai and also while we're in the human realm, Naruto said. Hagi quickly nodded before he noticed Naruto turn around. If a human so much as touches Saya-chan in a threatening way, you are to eliminate them, understood? Naruto asked and Hagi swiftly nodded once again. Naruto nodded before he watched the young man escort his adoptive daughter out of the room. Once it was quiet, Naruto fell into a deep sleep, always planning tomorrow's events and what they would entail. Next morning, birds sang in the forests, animals were beginning to show their appearances, and the sun was making its way over the horizon for a new day. The world was entirely at peace at this time. No one was fighting anyone else, no one had to worry about someone else, it was all merely quiet and peaceful. In the forest, on the ground, was a large seal, its origins and markings unknown to those who would stumble upon it. Its archaic words lost to the nations. Slowly, to no one's knowledge, the seal began to light up. The ground beneath it cracked slightly, power and force radiated from its center. A light burst from the center, trailing its warm glow around the swirl-like symbol, lighting up all of its words before the light overtook the forest. It was for but a brief moment as it settled down. The sound of various footsteps repeated in the forest. There stood one man and a few of his attendants. Naruto stepped out into the world, his feet feeling the rough, natural aura of the grass underneath him. In his arms, he held Saya. Behind him stood Grimori, Issa, Ari, Saya's guardian, Hagi, Grimori's wife, Venilana, Akasha, Toho, and Tenmei, Searzex, Serafal, Falbim, and Ajuka, all together. It certainly has a more natural feel for itself. Though I sense hardly any demonic essence here, the Grimori Satan remarked. Everyone quickly looked at the bright blue sky, in such contrast to their own sky back in Makai, it being red with the sounds of screeching of their native animals. Well, at least their world seems brighter than ours. I like it, Serafal stated exuberantly. Everyone turned to look at her, but she merely shrugged without a second thought. If she liked it, then she wasn't about to change her mind about it. Shaking his head, Naruto turned around. How are you feeling, Issa? Hagi-san? Naruto asked, his blonde hair flowing in the light breeze that was provided to him. Fairly well, Mao-sama. It's not bothering me, Hagi quickly confirmed. Issa nodded in agreement with the outcast vampire before turning his attention back to more important things. So where do we go? Mao-sama, the land has changed since demons have been here last. We do not know any of these countries, Issa reported. Naruto was very much aware of that little note. Nodding, he took a step forward. Well, luckily for you guys, I watched the world evolve that time, so I know where we are. However, before we move on, Ka-chan, it might be a good idea to discard the tail and ears, Naruto said. Ari raised an eyebrow while everyone took in her appearance. No one disagreed with him, not even Venilana. Why? Ari asked and Naruto sighed. Humans are not born with tails or fox ears. Like I said, I'd rather not draw attention to us if I can. Dadbeo, Naruto countered. Ari grumbled, but nodded with a strain of her head. She quickly allowed the tails to disappear into her behind while her ears regressed into her scalp and came out of the sides of her head. That would take some time to form, but Ari was sure her hair would hide the development. So Mao-sama, since you are the only one who virtually knows the ins and outs of this realm, then please enlighten us as to where we are, Venilana said. There was no malice or hidden stern tone in her speak, merely her wishes to discover their whereabouts. Naruto turned around and then pointed outwards over a hill. Well, since we are in Tea country, then we will stop there. I will persuade their daimyo to let us settle here. With any luck, things won't be as difficult as I imagine. Let's go, Naruto said as he walked off. Everyone quickly began to walk behind him. So it's called Tea country. Does that mean it's a country flowing with tea? Serafal asked. Naruto snickered, as did everyone else. This was going to be an interesting adventure. Night slowly descended over the lands of the country of tea. The moon shined brightly in the sky as people slowly, but surely began to fall under the spell of temporary slumber. This was no more true than with the land of tea's daimyo. In his mansion, the daimyo slept. His rising bulge of a stomach signified that he was at rest and at peace. He had a meeting with a few other daimyo in a couple of days. He had to get his rest when he could. Plus another reason that he could sleep as calmly as he did was because he knew he was protected by some of his best guards and warriors that he had stationed around the grounds. He didn't have to worry. Near his window the curtains flapped from a gentle breeze. The flapping of the curtains stirred him from his slumber by assaulting his ears. He gently opened his eyes and leaned forward. He took notice of the curtains. With a soft chuckle he shook his head. Looks like I'm more stressed out than I thought, he said to himself. Shaking his head, he dropped on his feet to the ground. He did this gently as he hoped he wouldn't disturb his wife. He made his way over to the window. Cold night. Though I thought I closed this window, he said to himself. With a small shrug he grabbed the folds of the window and gently placed the shutters down. With a tired yawn he looked out into the distance. As he did this he figured he was more sleepy than he assumed. Reason being, well, there was a man, floating in the air right in front of him. The daimyo rubbed his hands over his eyes. He had to be dreaming right. As his eyes got accustomed to the moonlight he figured did not move away from his spot. Rather, the figure was glaring directly at him with sharp, unwavering eyes. The figure's arms were folded. He wore clothing like the daimyo had never seen before. No doubt it was probably something worn by those of higher status. His dark, red eyes pierced the veil of the curtains. Slowly the figure raised his finger and pointed directly at the daimyo. The man shivered at the spot before he backed away from the corner. He blinked his eyes hard and then opened them. The figure was gone. Swallowing the heavy lump in his throat, the daimyo tried his best to take small, calming breaths. This couldn't have been good for his heart. With a sigh the daimyo walked back to his bed. Strange how he felt even more weary just now than he had the rest of the day. As he pulled up the covers from his bed, the daimyo suddenly paused. Pressure. He could feel some kind of pressure over him. He could hear voices inside his head. He could feel his will leaving. Turn around, a voice said with authority. The daimyo effortlessly turned around. His soulless eyes bore the sight of the figure in front of him. The figure smiled before stepping into the moonlight. I am Issa Shuzan, head of the Shuzan family. I am your lord. Now, kneel, Issa commanded, his voice cold and hard. The daimyo without complaint fell to his knees and bowed his head so low his forehead touched the soft carpet. He didn't move, or rather to say, he couldn't move. Your life, your will, your wife's life, her will, everything that moves and breathes in this compound is an extension of my will. You will obey my orders and you will follow my instructions to the letter. For us, everything we do is to the glory of Mao-sama. You will show him respect in private and in public you will act normal. You will make decisions aligned with his interests when I give the orders. Understood. The head of the Shuzan family asked with a small glare. The daimyo spoke. Hi, I am Issa-sama's servant. I am also a servant of Mao-sama. Everything done is to the glory of Mao-sama, the daimyo responded without emotion and without fail. Issa slowly turned around and headed back to the closed window. As he opened it, he slowly began to disperse as the screeching of bats could be heard before he ultimately disappeared from the daimyo's presence. As the daimyo looked up, he did nothing and said nothing. He merely raised up the covers, crawled into bed, and fell asleep. Weird night. X. Meanwhile, Issa swiftly landed on the rooftop of a hotel that the others had been staying. It was bland, but it was livable he supposed. As he landed, he dropped down to one knee. It is done Mao-sama, Issa said. In front of him stood Naruto as he looked over the possessed lands of the land of T. He had to admit that he had seen these lands numerous times in his ceiling. It wasn't a very bad land. Granted there were a few more things he had seen around lands like this than he truly cared for, but it seemed as good a place as any to get started. Arigato Issa. Since I am going to meet the daimyo tomorrow then I shouldn't have a hassle. Not like I couldn't deal with this easily, but I'd rather avoid bloodshed by my or any of our hands if I can help it, Naruto remarked. Issa nodded though he always didn't necessarily agree with his king's policy against the human race. Granted yes, he understood the repercussions of doing so, he still felt irritated. Many, and Issa meant many, demons had been killed by humans which was actually what prompted the Mao to create the Jubi in the first place, but the humans got away with it. Whether they were ignorant or not should not have been the case. Then again, humans were incapable of ever having one person to rule over all like the demons did. They couldn't compromise, and most of all, they couldn't accept when someone was better than them. Rather, Issa dare say he pitied the humans more than anything else. Truly a hollow existence. Understood, Mao-sama. I have also scouted out the outer perimeter. There doesn't seem to be anyone foolish as to head for you, or perhaps they do not. You've arrived just yet. However, if you truly wish to go along with this mission, then no doubt the humans will retaliate, Issa replied. Naruto sighed as he knew that to be true, but he had enough of humanity taking the lives of what wasn't theirs. He also had enough of seeing the scrutiny his children had been placed under. He was going to get them all. No matter what Kami and Michael had to say about it. Yes, I know, Issa, but don't worry. I'm not going to leave Makai by itself again. I will also not abandon my people. You have all waited for me long enough, you don't need to wait anymore, Naruto answered. Issa offered one final bow before standing to his feet. Both demons made their way back inside the hotel. Naruto bid Issa a good night as he went into his own room. Honestly, how could humans have rooms so small? A portion of Naruto's closets were bigger than this room, though Naruto had to laugh. It only showed just how much he had missed being able to have any kind of space. As he went into his own room, he noticed his mother tending to his adopted daughter. The smile on his mother's face was somewhat apparent. In the glow of the lights, she truly did look more beautiful than Naruto possibly gave her credit for. He truly missed his mother and missed her warm, calming presence. Her golden eyes just seemed to radiate a type of elegance that he wasn't sure many high-class demons could possess, and yet, Naruto remembered the struggle he put her through. For his mother to even contemplate the demon sacrifice ritual weighed heavily on his mind. It also told him just how much she had missed having him around. Granted, their relationship was special. Even without her ears or her tails, she was still lovely. I take it from the small smile on your face that the mission went well? Ari asked, holding Saya in her grasp. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Yep. Issa managed it, though I knew he would. Now Akasha is heading to Kiri to speak with some of the water yokai. I figured I should take them in order, but since I have Kyuubi first, then I figured to just start with the nearest location, Naruto answered. Ari swiftly nodded. Do you believe Konoha is going to come after you? The fox woman asked, making Naruto snort as he laid back on the small bed and closed his eyes. I wouldn't put it past them. In their eyes, Kurama is about the highest demon they could conceive to be powerful. However, Kyuubi and the rest of the Biju would be just about lower A-class demons. That's not to say he couldn't become beyond S-class like you, myself, Issa, Gregory or Venelana, but that type of class requires much more dedication than even some hardened demons are willing to admit to trying, Naruto figured. Ari closed her eyes as she and Saya fell to the bed as well. Saya giggled from the rush of wind as she wiggled herself out of Ari's grip and landed on the soft bed. Naruto and Ari watched her for a moment before both snickered. As their giggles subsided, Naruto noticed his mother's eyes soften. I missed you a lot. When you didn't come back after dealing with the sage, I only assumed the worst. I just couldn't take your position no matter how much others insisted. Sochi, Ari blinked as Naruto took a piece of her hair and held it to his lips. Ari watched her son for a moment as Naruto closed his eyes. For Naruto, the demonic essence that resided in this hair was calming. He gently chuckled to himself. I missed you too, Ka-chan. I was too complacent. I overestimated myself against Hagoromo and I paid the price for it. All my time in Seal I thought about you and the rest of Makai. I'm sorry for leaving such a heavy burden on you, Naruto apologized. Ari blinked before sighing to herself. With a twist of her body she rolled her entire body over her son's. She then looked at him. You really are a worrying son. But I'm glad you've returned to me. Just be more careful next time, Ari pleaded. Naruto had to admit that his mother never pleaded. Granted, she would ask for lots of things every now and then, but she would never seriously plead. Naruto closed his eyes once again. The Mao raised his hand and caressed his mother's cheek. I promise. I'm here to stay this time, Naruto responded. Ari merely nodded and leaned forward. Saya didn't know why her mama and dada were suddenly hugging tightly with their faces so closely knitted together. She was only aware of the warm, demonic essence that told her to stay near it. In that demonic essence was safety as well as some kind of love. Say more than likely instinctively knew it. It made her happy and boundless with joy. Plus the person taking care of her, Saya recognized him as her father. They say that like a bird, a child imprints upon its parents recognizing who they are when they are born. Perhaps because her father offered her that sense of security was why Saya felt so comfortable in his embrace. He was like Mama. Naruto and Ari detached from each other's lips as both panted. There are many things I can charm Sochi. However, I'm sure you know there aren't many things that can charm me, Ari said in a rather defiant tone that Naruto took note of. Her rolled his eyes before smirking. Ka-chan, your abilities are one of the things that makes you a beyond S-class demon, but I think you're underestimating me, Naruto remarked much to his mother's impish joy. Oh, and what are you going to do about it? Ari asked with a devious smirk. Naruto would have more than liked to show her what he was going to do, but right now they had an audience and Naruto wasn't ready to subject his adoptive daughter to that type of scene. Need I remind you we have a separate set of eyes, Ka-chan? You're going to scar my poor daughter, Naruto reminded, making Ari turn to Saya, who had cluelessly been watching the scene while she sucked her thumb. Ari smiled gently, remembering the young unknown vampire. Spoilsport, Ari said with another separate sigh as she rolled off her son and onto the bed. Naruto just chuckled good-naturedly. As both noticed Saya yawn, Naruto and Ari prepared themselves for bed. After turning out the lights, Naruto gently kissed Saya's forehead as he watched the vampire fall asleep. Naruto and Ari collected themselves as well before retiring themselves. Naruto sat on the carpeted floor with Issa, Grimori, Ari and the four great Satans sitting behind him. In front of the 8 members sat the Daimyo with at least 5 guards, each with either a sword or a spear in hand. Along next to the Daimyo had been the man's supposed minister. Naruto could only silently grin to himself. As the Mao had already known, evil and chaos appeared in all forms. Even in the realms of heaven and Makai there were such things. The human realm was obviously no exception. Quite the opposite. Naruto figured that the human realm exemplified that more than Makai or heaven. Humans valued having their own way too much to have compromise. Naruto had asked Tenmei and Toho to scout out other areas while the other attended the meeting. Naruto had also asked for Hagi to look after Saya for the time being. It was at this time that the minister to the daimyo spoke. Well, I didn't think that we would be meeting the person who caused such a ruckus in Konoha a few days ago. How small the world is, he said with a rather cunning smile. Naruto didn't reply and neither did any of his attendants. The minister to the daimyo raised an eyebrow before the daimyo himself cleared his throat. You are indeed a wanted man, Uzumaki-san. The reason I even accepted this meeting with you was because you claimed it was critical to the success of the country. Please speak your piece, the daimyo replied. At these words, Naruto finally opened his eyes. Those eyes made the guards, minister, and daimyo shiver. Eyes radiating with untold, unattainable, boundless power. The type of eyes that told them they were speaking with a higher authority than what they should have been talking with. Naruto sent a glance to Issa with a small smirk. Issa just bowed. Very well. First things first, daimyo-san. As of this moment, I will be taking control of Dagarashi Port, Naruto stated clearly, leaving no way for anyone in the room to question what he was saying. Searsex and Falbium sent a small glance to each other. Ajuka narrowed his eyes while Serafal merely smiled to herself. That was easily just like their Mao at times. No doubt his irritation with humans was leaking a bit in his speak, but no one clearly minded. After all, one were sealed away for a millennia, then it would stand to reason that they would still be more than a little pissed off. Silence came over the room. The guards looked at the blonde like he just grown a second head. The minister to the daimyo stammered while the daimyo himself was speechless. All the people on the opposite side of the table just stared at Naruto for the better part of about a minute before everyone heard laughing. Naruto turned a raised eyebrow to the minister. He didn't recall saying something that warranted laughter. The minister calmed himself with a sigh. I never took you for a comedian, Uzumaki-san, but surely you jest. The Dagarashi port is currently under the control of the Wagarashi family. Control of Dagarashi has been under the control of 2 families for many years. Both families have had an influence in the stabilization of T country. You can't just come here and proclaim control over Dagarashi port so easily, the minister replied with another lasting chuckle. What would you do with Dagarashi port even if you did attain ownership of it? The tea daimyo asked, much to the minister's interest. Naruto didn't speak for a moment, taking into account the room as well as the atmosphere. One thing about being a king was that all deals had to be made in the interest of the nation as well as the king himself. While Naruto could have cared less about humanity as a whole, he would have liked to make the conscious attempt to not become the demise of the entire race if he could help it. If humanity was the cause of its own destruction, then he was sure that his race wouldn't lose any sleep over it. What I plan to do with Dagarashi port isn't any of your concern. Just know that I will make the port a lot better than what you have been doing to it. So I must merely meet with the head of the Wagarashi family. Is this correct? Naruto asked. In the centuries that he had seen the world known as the Elemental Nations, he had come across many places, and the creation of Tea Country was one of those places. One thing Naruto knew was surprised by was that some of his clansmen had tormented this particular land for a time. Naruto had no idea of why, but upon the Mao's investigation it had led down to the humans, unknowingly mind you, taking 2 demonic jewels that some had possibly grown. Naruto remembered them. They were merely lantern crystals for those ground yokai who liked to live in the earth. Those jewels had been offered to a shrine near these grounds, and that seemed to appease the demons, though Naruto was probably more sure that his mother forego the crystals for more important matters. This more than likely for the humans meant that they had gained some type of favor. If Naruto had to give humans one thing, then it was that ignorance was bliss. On that note, Naruto stood to his feet, as did the rest of his council. You know, Uzumaki-san, Tea Country has a treaty with Konoha. We're more than obligated to tell them that you're here. Please don't make this difficult for yourself and for us. If you truly wanted to take control of the region, then you would have to participate in our Todoroki race, but even then that is a tradition only reserved for members of the Wagarashi and Wasabi families. Understand what I'm saying? The minister said with a small smirk. It was then that the daimyo gently bowed. Forgive him, Naruto-san. He's just a stubborn man. I merely say that I must look out for the best interest of the country as a whole, and a wanted man like you is bound to draw unnecessary attention, the daimyo replied. At these words, Naruto released a small chuckle. How interesting. It was even that Naruto knew he could thoroughly end Konoha or even the rest of the world if he wished, but it didn't align with his agenda. If you wish to alert Konoha to my presence, then that's fine. We'll be on our way, Naruto said as he and his entourage quickly left the room without any more words being spoken. The tea daimyo released the pent-up breath he had been holding. The man had witnessed many a great shinobi, but none exuded such a mighty, heavy, kingly aura like the young man before him. Meanwhile, the minister to the daimyo scowled away from the sight of the daimyo himself. While it was in the country's best interest to turn over Naruto to Konoha, at the same time it was probably beneficial to learn of his skills. This deserved a talk with the Wagarashi family. Naruto and the others exited the daimyo's compound. So what now, Ma-tan? Came the question of the female Leviathan Satan. Naruto looked up at the clear, blue sky for a couple of moments. Honestly, from the couple of interactions we've had with humans, I am still impressed by their hubris, Falbium replied with a small look of indignation. I would imagine that we'll be doing exactly what you said we would be doing, Mao-sama. We'll now meet with the Wagarashi family. Searzex asked, swiping a blade of his hair from his face. It would make the most sense, though it's obvious that the minister is in league with one of these families. His aura is showing signs of degeneration. If I had to say, then he's not going to live for very long, Grimori responded. Issa didn't say anything, and neither did Ari. They could somehow tell what their Mao was thinking. The best way to deal with opposition was to go against what the opposition thought you would do. For now, we'll go meet with the Wasabi family. From what I can tell, they will be the most reasonable to talk with. I do expect some hostility, but for this I figure Dagarashi port is the best place to start with, Naruto said as they began to walk through the streets. The masses of people watched the group with interested eyes. It stood to reason that they were an odd sight. They had arrived only about a day ago and were seen leaving the daimyo's estate. No doubt people wanted to possibly know who they were and where they had come from. No one truly minded, but perhaps their clothing was what gave them away. It wasn't exactly traditional Japanese attire if only truly cared to know. As the demons and devils walked through the streets, they took in the sights. The human realm didn't exactly seem that different from the Makai realm in terms of shops and things like that. It was actually quite interesting how similar humans and demons. Yet even Naruto was aware of the hatred that the two races held for each other. In some areas, the Mao was willing to admit that his race was perhaps at fault sometimes as well. After all, not every demon submitted to him as a king, or not every demon accepted him as king. Just like humans had their own minds and opinions, so the same was for demons. Naruto understood this very well. There were demons who felt like treating humans the same way humans treated them. Naruto couldn't even remember the countless meetings he had with Kami about the demons and some of the things they had done to humans. Naruto had always been able to turn it around by stating to Kami what the humans had done to his own race as well, and if she wished for it to stop, then she should reign in her territory, or he would have done it for her. Naruto figured that he knew the truth along with Kami. Soon, and Naruto didn't know how soon, but humans, demons, and angels were going to clash, and Naruto wondered if even he would be enough to stop it. Well, Naruto would do his best to prevent that, and the first solution to that was taking the Biju back from the humans. After that, well, Naruto didn't know, but he wouldn't be here longer than needed. As the Mao and his entourage appeared before the Wasabi Manor, Serafal tilted her head to the side. They certainly do look homey, I guess. It looks more like a small village than a compound, the Leviathan Satan commended. Sirzex lifted his hand and covered the sun from his eyes. Yeah, though I suppose it's similar to the organized crime syndicates that Makai had at one point in time. So then, how about we greet ourselves, Mao-sama? Sirzex asked before Naruto raised his hand. Not yet. I'd like to not appear suspicious than I already am for this realm. Sirzex, Serafal, go scout out the Wagarashi family. If you must fight, then use non-lethal tactics. Other than that, you're good. Falbium and Ajuka will check out the Dagarashi port gate. Ask any of the guards stationed there how things are run for that area. Grimori, Issa, Ka-chan and I will head inside, Naruto commanded. The four Satans swiftly nodded before they went their separate ways. As they did so, Naruto proceeded to knock on the door. It is more than likely that they will have the same reaction to your plans, Mao-sama, Gregory remarked. Naruto was already aware of this, but it was somewhat comforting to know that he wasn't the only one thinking that. Naruto merely nodded, but he and the others straightened up when the door opened. What do you want? Asked a gruff voice from behind the door. Naruto quickly answered, deciding not to waste any more of his time. Tell your boss that I would like to speak with him, Naruto replied quickly. The person behind the gates raised a small eyebrow. He then sighed. If you're here to talk about your payment for protection services, then go to the Wagarashi family. Dagarashi port isn't under the ownership of Joroku Kumacho. If you have complaints, then take them to those bastards, he sneered before shutting the door. Naruto blinked while Issa folded his arms at the blatant disrespect. Gregory shook his head while Ari huffed. Nice guy, Ari decided to comment. Naruto and his group agreed with her before they saw Ari sigh. I would only do this for you, Sochi, Ari said while Naruto chuckled. Looks like his mother was going to use that ability. Of course, considering she was a fox yokai, then it stood to reason that it would have been a part of her nature. Issa and Grimori watched intently as Ari knocked on the gates. The head gates opened. Look, I told you to get lost. Are you hard of here, Ing? The person behind the door shuddered as Ari winked playfully. Now please be reasonable. We really need to see your boss. So would be a cutie and let us in? Ari asked with a beautiful smile. The person gawked. This woman was beautiful. Actually, she was beyond beautiful. She was gorgeous. No, not even gorgeous. She was exquisite. No, not even exquisite. She was divine. Everything about her seemed perfect. I really don't think I should, the person stuttered before Ari pouted and batted her eyelashes. Pretty please? Ari asked, with an internal sigh of indignation and frustration. Coating two of her fingers and the reaches of her lips in demonic energy, Ari blew a kiss towards the man. To the human eye, nothing was wrong with this, but for demons it was easy to see the pink mist of energy leave Ari's mouth and wrap itself around the person. His eyes slowly flew downward to being lidded. His guard dropped. No doubt for Ari it was unpleasant to use this ability on anyone, especially a human. She had long since given up using this ability of hers, as it was the reason she had many problems which still existed today. Her use of this technique was only for more important circumstances. Besides, she didn't really feel the need to use it anymore. Well, I guess I can let him know. What did your group say it was? The guard asked with a sharp blush on his face. Issa and Grimori shook their hands. It seemed that still the technique was as lethal as the day Ari had created it. No doubt her liberal use of the technique itself was probably for reasons such as this. You can just call us the Society, Ari said with a smile before the guard walked away with a sharp nod. Naruto, Issa, and Grimori could just see the bright red flumes expunging from the man's skull. Ari set her gaze open the three men before smirking. Grimori couldn't resist a chuckle. It's been a while since we've Aries Miryoku, charm, techniques. If I recall, the last person you used that on was Wukong-san back in Makai about 3 millennia ago for a bet, Grimori guessed while Ari held her hand up. Guilty as charged. I'd rather not let things get more complicated than they already are. We'll meet with Sochi's interest and then we'll move on to the next order of business. If I can be fair, this realm isn't the best for sustaining the life energy of demons. The energy that surrounds this atmosphere is very odd. Though I suppose chakra is a lesser form of demonic energy, so it stands to reason that it would be odd feeling, Ari responded. Now that Grimori and Issa were aware of it, Makai didn't necessarily have the Earth's bright, yellow sun. Makai's sun was more crimson, just like the blood that shaped a couple of rivers, but then again these types of things were probably what makes the Earth different from Makai. I do feel it as well. Though I have been to the human realm countless times, their sun still weakens me a little bit. Just a minor inconvenience at best, Issa remarked. Grimori chuckled to himself before everyone heard the door open. Joriko Kumacho will see you. But keep in mind that he has a guest at the moment. Make yourself brief, the guard said, unlocking the door. Naruto gave a small smirk as he walked inside. Ari, Grimori and Issa followed behind him. Hagi and Venilana watched as Saya crawled along the ground to Rias. Her incoherent sounds only made Rias giggle more, though it was truth that the daughter of Grimori and Venilana wasn't capable of coherent speech either. Perhaps the two would become good friends in the future. So you've looked around and she really doesn't belong to any of the clans? The brunette maiden of destruction asked while Hagi leaned himself against the wall. Ever since he had been given the task of guarding the Demon King's daughter, he had taken the liberty of researching as much as he could about the unknown vampire. Unfortunately, there wasn't much to know. She wasn't from any of the clans as the clan leaders had spoke about, and she didn't have the natural physical highlights of a vampire child. In all likelihood, it's possible that she is a human-turned vampire or the product of a human-vampire taboo. Or, there are possibilities that she is a descendant of his blood, Hagi remarked. Venetian didn't give any intent that she had been affected by his words, but her thoughts had suddenly been jumbled, if only slightly. Watching Saya play with Rias and their toys, Venilana couldn't deny it. It was certainly possible. She could have the blood of a true Beyond S-class demon. The blood of the very first vampire king, Alucard. His powers were said to be so great that it took Akasha, Ari, Vazda, Toho, Grimori, Venilana, Tenmei and a great number of Makai to completely suppress his army until he was sealed away by their Mao during the fight. After all, he was the only one who, ever since the second Kami, had tried to challenge Naruto for the title of Mao. Venilana still remembered that war. It was almost a war that collided with the humans and the divine beings. I don't think we should jump to such a strong conclusion just yet. There is no evidence which can clearly support that. Still, it's worth looking into, I suppose. But for now, let's just let her be a child and enjoy her life, Venilana suggested. Hagi merely bowed to her suggestion before he watched the two very young children continue playing with each other. It brought a small smile to her face. As Naruto, Ari, Issa and Grimori were led towards the house of the head of the Wasabi family, Naruto also took into account the whispers that some people made about their group. He also could feel the intent of people wishing to reach for their weapons should they feel that their group was a threat. Though then again, Naruto was fairly certain he could disarm everyone from this far away, so it wasn't like they were an intimidating bunch. Then again, humans seem to love bravado just as much as demons and a few divine beings. Maybe that was more akin to pride in their own skills as a race more than anything else. He did notice a few eyes land upon his mother. Don't get him wrong, Naruto was sure that beauty was made to be gazed upon and admired. Naruto had seen many beautiful women in his life, ranging from Kami to, yes, some humans. Still, that didn't expressly mean he was pleased if they might have gone further than that. His mother didn't seem to have a problem, or she just didn't notice them so he wouldn't make an issue out of it. As the guide led them to the main door in the main hall of the main house, she turned around. Please keep in mind that he has a guest. Also do try to be respectful if you're making a request. Joriko-sama is kind, but even his kindness has its limits, the woman said. Naruto didn't reply. He merely took a hold of the door and opened it. As Naruto opened the door, he tilted his head to the side while Ari, Grimory and Issa jumped out of the way as a human flew past them and bashed into the wall. Naruto raised an eyebrow. As far as he understood humans, that wasn't a typical greeting. Well, humans were strange like that. A clash of many personalities their race was. Yet the same was true for Makai and for other realms. Ari and Grimory blinked while Issa and Naruto looked past the door. As they looked inside, they heard a shout. Tsunade-sama. A brunette woman shouted from her side of the room, looking at the sheer destruction that her supposed master was making. Naruto looked in the direction of the woman that the brunette had been shouting at before he noticed another woman, lightly taller than her. Her hair was an interesting color of blonde. There was that, and Naruto couldn't help noticing the interesting development this woman had compared to other human, or even demon women. It looked strangely distracting. Still, that didn't stop Naruto from noticing the small diamond seal at the top of her head. He could feel the large concentration of energy circulating around it. Like a hellhound behind a closed cage, it was there just waiting to be opened, unleashed and controlled. Even more so, Naruto could feel the other energy circulating around this woman. He was sure of it. A descendant of Hashirama Senju. A direct line, I would imagine. She has his overpowering chakra for normal human standards, Naruto thought to himself before he heard the woman named Tsunade growl. No one takes away my sake Shizune. No one. Not even one of your lackeys, Joriko, the blonde woman snarled out while the woman Naruto and the others had now identified as Shizune shivered beneath her gaze. In the center of the room, Naruto heard laughing and noticed the man he had sought to speak with. His gray hair and lightly black-colored eyes were the easily noticeable thing to Naruto even before his age. Still, in those eyes, Naruto could tell there was a bit of wisdom and experience in them. Naruto hadn't seen Joriko's upbringing, so he didn't have much to go off of. Still, these people who have to have their bickering later. In time, Joriko turned his attention to the door and took notice of Naruto and the rest of his party. Joriko stiffened. Everything in his being was telling him that young-looking man in front of him was strong. Much stronger than anyone he had ever met. He could possibly even be stronger than. Joriko closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He had to calm down. He couldn't afford to lose his senses to such an overwhelming presence. So, this was Uzumaki Naruto, supposed clansman of the Uzumaki clan and wanted man of Konoha for mysterious reasons. Joriko couldn't resist the smirk that came to his face. Looks like this day had brought many interesting things. I presume you to be Naruto Uzumaki? Joriko asked with a small, welcoming smile. Tsunade quickly paused before turning around. Her eyes stared into Naruto's for but a moment. So this was the container for the Kyuubi that had gotten away from Konoha. Tsunade remembered running into her old teammate, Jiraiya. He had told her what Sarutobi had told him about the incident. It had saddened Tsunade that Minato was gone. He was a good friend, albeit an idiot at some specific times than others. Still, the blonde man had a very interesting place in Tsunade's heart. Now that Tsunade thought about it, this young man looked just like Minato, only more serious. Was that what Tsunade should have used? Regardless, she could feel immense power not just from him, but also from his party. That woman behind him looked quite strong despite her delicate frame. Then there was that red-haired man and the dark-haired man. Both, by their stances, seemed to be of upper nobility, but Tsunade never remembered encountering such people before. Hell, Tsunade didn't want to toot her own horn, but she just wondered if it was possible for her to take them all on. Naruto smiled at his name. Perhaps he should have used a cover name rather than blatantly stating it back in Konoha. Granted, yes, for demons names were power, but merely saying Naruto's name over and over wouldn't do anything to him unless certain conditions were met, but Naruto digressed. Yeah, that would be me. Thank you for agreeing to see me, though you seem preoccupied. Naruto asked, turning a glance to Tsunade and Shizune. The two stiffened while the guards swallowed the lumps in their throat. Joriko laughed before he patted his legs. Hi, you will have to forgive the ruckus. It's not every day I get to meet an old friend of mine, Joriko calmly said, to which Naruto nodded. He took a step forward. The guards quickly began to organize and clean up the mess while setting down mats for Naruto, Ari, Grimori and Issa to sit on. Naruto took the offering and sat before Joriko. Tsunade-sama, what should we do? Alert Konoha. Shizune whispered to her master's ear. Tsunade bit her lower lip. She had run away from Konoha. In her eyes, she didn't have an obligation to tell them anything, and yet, such a power couldn't just go around unchecked. Tsunade knew that the most. Who knew what this young man's agenda was? Tsunade glared as she noticed Naruto turn a slight gaze to them. It only told her that he had heard Shizune's whispered comment. Tsunade knew she had to trust her instincts. She really didn't want to fight this man. No, we'll wait, Tsunade remarked, shocking her traveling partner. However, Shizune didn't say anything else as the two women sat quietly. This seemed important. I see. Well, I think it's always nice to have friends, Naruto replied. Joriko nodded his head before clearing his throat. May I get you anything before we begin? He asked. Naruto turned back to his group for any wants. They didn't seem to want anything, so Naruto turned back. No thank you. We appreciate the offer, but we'd rather not waste any more of your time than we already are, Naruto responded. Joriko exhaled a small sigh before motioning one of his servants over. He whispered in his ear before the man left. After a few minutes he came back with a bottle and a small sake cup. He poured the sake into Joriko's cup and then excused himself. Joriko took a sip. Very well. Let us speak. What would you like to say? Joriko asked. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment. The air in the room was tight. In fact, for some others it was suffocating. That wasn't any different for Tsunade and Shizune. The former could feel the bead of sweat drop from her face. I'll make this simple. I will be taking control of Dagarashi port from both the Wagarashi and Wasabi families before the end of this week, Naruto stated, or rather dare some people say commanded. Tsunade raised an eyebrow while Shizune gasped. Murmurs could have easily been heard over the subordinates, and Naruto could tell the people eavesdropping behind the doors were shocked as well. The only one who seemed to be taking the surprise well was Joriko, yet Naruto could tell that he was unnerved. His grip on his sake cup had tightened slightly and his seating had become more rigid. Naruto decided not to give him the chance to adjust. The same principles here were applied to wartime which Naruto had been in countless times. Joriko-san, I don't believe you're stupid. Far from it actually. You, as well as the Wagarashi leader, understand that this little method you both have for determining ownership of the port will only grow worse down the generations. Even more so, you understand that economically only one of you can truly attempt to make such a port prosper. I have to be blunt. I have to save the port from the destruction the both of you are going to bring it to, Naruto spoke. Now understand that Naruto honestly did mean this. Though it all wasn't entirely for the humans as much as it was for the demons. Naruto needed a place, no matter how small, that could act as a gateway for him between this realm and Makai. More than likely that would serve to have him keep the order in Makai while still going about this mission of his. There was another reason, of course. Tsunade widened her eyes to his words. Shizune did the same. Now Tsunade could see where the blonde was coming from. No doubt changes in ownership were bound to lead with problems somewhere down the line, and when that line was come across, then it would break out a large war between the two families. No doubt the Todoroki shrine race wouldn't placate everyone forever. Especially not that old goat, Kairoku Wagarashi. Tsunade truly despised the man, and yet she couldn't help finding herself asking some internal questions. What did this man truly want with Dagarashi port, and what made him come here? Tsunade took a deep breath. After some time Joriko came over his shock and slumped his shoulders. Uzumaki-san, I wouldn't expect you to know the great and tragic history of the Wasabi and the Wagarashi families. I do find truth in what you say, but Dagarashi port is our homeland and our birthright. We can't just accept ownership from an outside source so easily. The Todoroki shrine race has been founded upon honor and trust between the families. Besides, the two families have the daimyo's support. You surely can't say the same for yourself, Joriko said with a glare. Naruto didn't meet it. He had no reason to. It would have been a waste of his time as a king. I do know of Dagarashi's history, Joriko-san. It's simple to say that it isn't your homeland nor your birthright, for either of your families. The first settlers to what is now Dagarashi port were a band of criminals and thieves. In fact, before Dagarashi was formed, it had founded the first Thieves' Guild. Your ancestors and the Wagarashi's ancestors banded together and destroyed the Thieves' Guild. It wasn't a long battle, but after your negotiations you offered to share the land. This land in fact belongs to no one. Besides, the history of the two families shouldn't be the basis for this talk of ownership. You also understand the reason for some missing people in that port. After all, Dagarashi is the only port in T country that is a relatively safe route for members to trade and transport materials to other nations. That's more than likely why the both of you want it, Naruto surmised. Joriko frowned for a second. He still couldn't deny that he was impressed by Naruto's knowledge of that era. If he were truthful, then not many people could have known that or that particular history. Joriko also couldn't deny that what Naruto was saying about the roots was true. Joriko took a sip of his sake and exhaled a breath. You came to be stating this for a reason, I would assume. If this were supposed to be some sort of hostile takeover, then you would have no reason to speak with me about it. You want something from our family, do you not? Joriko asked. At this point, Naruto straightened up. The only true thing I want is for both the Wagarashi and Wasabi to not interfere with Dagarashi port any longer. While being forceful is one other method, I doubt it's the best method, Naruto answered. Joriko sighed once again. What Naruto was asking of him was literally like breaking the entire two families' cycle of tradition. Yet Joriko also had to be realistic. He could see where everything was going as well. Fights between the two families were becoming more and more common. People in Dagarashi were dying a lot faster than before also. Joriko understood that perhaps it was now time to have someone take full ownership, and truthfully he didn't want it to be the Wagarashi family. Hell, already having them in that position currently was leaving a bad taste in his mouth. Still, what could a wanted man from Konoha exactly want? You are demanding many things, Uzumaki-san. However, I know nothing about you or your intentions. This would be a different story if, say, Tsunade would be asking me, but how do I know that you aren't the same? Joriko asked. Ari, Grimori and Issa remained silent, but they watched Naruto's reaction steadily. Naruto chuckled. Truly, if there was ever one good thing in humanity, then it would probably be this man. Suddenly everyone was on edge as Naruto stood to his feet. Naruto turned back to Issa, Grimori and his mother. Come on, we're leaving. We'll meet with the Wagarashi next. No doubt that will be a more hostile setting than what we got here, but it's better than just leaving it alone. Let's go, Naruto said as he walked towards the door. Joriko and Tsunade noticed that the others with him obeyed as they got up, bowed, and proceeded to leave the room along with Naruto. Just a moment, Uzumaki-san. You didn't answer my question, Joriko urged, making Naruto pause. He turned around and merely offered a foxy smile. Joriko widened his eyes to that smile. It was then that he understood. This young man, being could have taken Dagarashi port away from T country, the Wasabi family, and the Wagarashi family if he so desired even at this moment. In fact, he could very well destroy everyone in this country. The only thing stopping him, benevolence. Joriko took a deep breath. This young man was serious. Thank you for your time, Joriko-san, Naruto said as he closed the door. As he closed the door, Naruto took notice of the servants stumbling to move themselves out of his way in relative surprise. Naruto ignored them as he and the others went off and out of the Wasabi compound. Upon Naruto's leaving, everyone in the room felt the ominous and powerful pressure in the room subside. People began to fall to the knees while Joriko placed a hand over his face. His hand felt wet. From his face. Was this sweat? Had the boss of the Wasabi family actually been sweating slightly? Such an immense aura. Meanwhile, Tsunade stood to her feet and narrowed her eyes. It was probably for the best that she didn't get involved, but damn it if this didn't intrigue her. She could feel more power in that man than in her grandfather, Hashirama Senju, the very first Hokage of Konoha. It was like she was swimming in an endless ocean of abundant energy. There was literally no beginning to it and no end to it. No, Tsunade couldn't let him leave that easily. She had to know. Something made this man dangerous, and she knew it wasn't the fact that he held the Kyuubi inside himself. There was something else there. Tsunade-sama, are you okay? Shizune asked, alerting Tsunade to her traveling companion's presence. She stared at her for a moment. I'm fine, Shizune, Tsunade said, looking back at the door. Don't do it, Tsunade. Don't get curious with him. He's beyond our understanding. I have come to realize that much, Joriko said with a stern glance towards the door. Tsunade looked at her old friend before turning back to the door. You don't have to tell me that. I know that more than anyone. Still, if he's as you say, then it could be bad for your country if he's left alone. In fact, it's bad if they're all left alone. You should alert Konoha just in case, Tsunade said, heading for the door as well. Shizune moved to follow. You won't do it yourself? Joriko asked. Tsunade stopped at the door. Her grip tightened on the sliding door enough to make said door crack from some sort of excess pressure. Shizune sighed sadly. I have cut my ties to that place, Tsunade said before walking out the door. Joriko sighed with a sad nod of his own. He knew about the woman's troubles. Obviously, death followed around her like a plague, but he also had faith she would get out of her slump someday. All it would take was some time. Sears X and Serafal floated in the air as they peered into the windows of the Wagarashi family. Serafal smiled as she folded her legs. Well, I can see why Mao-sama wished to God visit Mr. Wasabi-san first. This place doesn't look like much fun. What do you think they do in here? Serafal asked while Sears X sighed as he folded his arms. Hey, I bet they do a lot of interesting things. Though I think we're going to have to tell Mao-sama about that other thing some of the demons have been doing, Sears X said, making Serafal stiffen. That didn't sound like a pleasant conversation. The Leviathan Satan leaned up and scratched her head. That sounds about right. Still, I wonder where that man was carrying that woman off to. They both looked so happy, Serafal said, making the Lucifer Satan place a hand over his mouth to stifle a chuckle. It was then that Sears X felt his body shiver. With a small grin, he quickly held out his hand and focused his demonic energy. Quickly a white orb appeared after some time. Sears X, Serafal, how did the scout go? Came the voice of their Mao. The two Satans nodded before Sears X spoke. Well, Mao-sama, the place is very well guarded. Many humans litter the place, but it's just as well that the place smells of blood in some areas. No doubt you may have a confrontation. Well, if you want it to go that far, Sears X spoke to the white orb. Quickly Serafal made her presence known as she made Sears X squirm when he bashed her cheek into his own. The guys also like to get into a lot of sword fights. You can even hear the swords from out here, and even some of them are shouting like a gong in the palace. It's like dawn. Over and over, Serafal said, waving her hands for emphasis, though Sears X knew Naruto couldn't see it. He only sweat dropped. One day he's probably have to show Serafal a couple of things. Still, that would probably suffice for now. Is that right? Well, good work, you two. You can leave now. Issa, Grimori, Ka-cha, and I will take over from there. Meet up with Falbium and Ajuka. Prepare the ceiling in the words just behind the lands. Also, take Mocha Akashiya if you can find her. That's all, Naruto said before closing the orb. Sears X watched the energy disperse before patting Serafal's shoulder. Shall we go? Sears X asked. Serial grinned before happily nodding as the two Satans flew off into the distance. Meanwhile, Naruto turned around. I appreciate you letting me bring Mocha, Issa. I'd rather not keep her cooped up in her room, Naruto said, which only made Issa shake his head. I do agree that Mocha could stand to get out a little more. I only worry about her controlling her power while around humans. This is her second time interacting with them, and even then her first time wasn't the best from what you remember, Issa answered. Naruto nodded. He did remember that time, and it was actually a time that he would have rather liked to forget. It actually involved itself with a rather rogue demon-angel hybrid that Naruto knew was more than likely walking around the world like an idiot. Honestly, Eva couldn't have chosen a better demon to have an affair with than Sparta. If worse comes to worse, then I'll deal with it. You have my word, Naruto said with a grin. Issa folded his arms, but didn't stop returning the smirk. I have faith that you would, Mao-sama, Issa remarked. Naruto's eyebrow twitched at the way Issa said that, but he decided not to comment. Tsunade-sama, Are you sure about this? Who knows what will happen, Shizune said while the blonde Senju knelt down and tied a scroll to a slug, a blue and white colored slug to be precise. Tsunade just narrowed her eyes in the forest that they were in before clearing her throat. This is the only thing I will do for Konoha. Oji-sama gave his life to peace for the world by capturing the Biju. If one really is roaming around, then Konoha needs to clean up its own damn mess. But I'm not getting involved any further. Come on Shizune, we're leaving. Katsuyu, we're counting on you. Tsunade said to the small slug. Katsuyu quickly nodded her head as best she could. Hi, you can count on me Tsunade-sama. I'll make sure to get this to Sandame-sama, the small slug named Katsuyu said with a nod of her slimy head. She was ready to poof out before she turned herself into the direction of the tea country village. Katsuyu widened her eyes. So it seemed that the myths were true. A true demon was roaming around the created earth in his kingly presence. Should Katsuyu tell her summoner? Should she not? No doubt this message that the slug was delivering pertained to him, the demon king of Makai. Katsuyu always assumed he was just a folktale that her ancestors liked to tease the children about, but nothing could stop her quivering. How he hadn't crushed all those in his vicinity underneath his pressure truly showcased his benevolence. Tsunade-sama, Katsuyu spoke. Tsunade and Shizune looked down as they noticed Katsuyu look at them. I have been in your service for, I believe, 16 years now. Please, don't get your village involved with this young man. I beg you. Katsuyu bowed. Tsunade blinked while Shizune remained silent. How dangerous was this person? What weren't Joriko and Katsuyu telling her? Oh, trust her that she could hardly care about Konoha anymore, but, what had even Katsuyu, her best summon, so rigid? Tsunade sighed. Katsuyu, the Kyuubi is a dangerous force to the entire world as are the other 8 Biju. I'm not going to let my thoughts go to what would happen if I hadn't told Konoha. What they do with the knowledge I will give them is on their hands. However, if I let him get away and he wrecks some other people, then I'll have that on my conscience. I refuse to have any conscience when it comes to Konoha. Katsuyu, please deliver it, Tsunade said with a final bow. Katsuyu didn't say anything. So, that's how it was going to be. When Katsuyu returned home from her mission, she would go see the elder slug princess. Hopefully, just hopefully, there was some good news to be had here. Katsuyu just disappeared in white smoke, leaving Tsunade and Shizune alone. The blonde Senju sighed. Shizune, do you think I did the right thing here? Tsunade asked, prompting her young assistant to look at her. Shizune only looked at the ground. I wouldn't know Tsunade-sama. Even now my legs won't stop shaking when I remember that man, but I trust in your judgment. That is all I can say. Now then, shall we go? Shizune asked with a somewhat brightening smile. Tsunade snorted, but allowed a small smile to grace her pleasant face as she began to leave the town along with Shizune to adventures untold. Meanwhile, Naruto, Issa, Grimoire, and Ari appeared before the Wagarashi family's compound. Certainly bigger than the more modest Wasabi family, Grimoire made the observation. He shielded the hot, bright, yellow sun from his eyes to get a better picture of the tower. Issa took a single glance at the structure's length before closing his eyes. Truly a waste of human time in structure and practice. Ari just began to stretch herself. All this walking was boring her stiff. Trust her when the malposition did the same for her as well. However, I do sense many people within this compound. About as many as the Wasabi family, give or take a servant or two. Though Mao-sama, I can also sense the intent here, as can you. It's just as Grimoire's son and the Seraphal Leviathan stated. There is a lot of tension, unrest within this compound. It almost seems like everyone is ready to betray everyone else at a moment's notice, Issa responded. Ari snorted. In all my millennia of being alive, I haven't known humans to ever know what they want in their lives, Ari remarked. Issa couldn't have found that to be more true than ever before. Honestly, neither could Grimoire. The latter could still remember the time before humans were even around. Sure, he was young around that time period, but it still counted regardless. All 3 demons sighed. The odds that the Wagarashi family knew they were coming was relatively high, so it wasn't as much a point as probably making themselves known versus completely forcing their will upon them if they did. Naruto in truth didn't exactly want either, but one was better than the other and the repercussions that followed. No, Naruto wasn't afraid to directly deal with Kami if he had to. Both the beings knew their place in this type of thing. Still, he at least figured that if he was going to be testing the boundaries, then what better way to do so than right now? I'm sure not even the humans themselves can answer that question, Ari. If anything, I find it to be Kami's greatest mistake in giving them dominion over this planet. Mao-sama, you didn't protest at that time, did you? Grimoire asked, much to Naruto's tired response. I didn't think highly of humans at that point. If I'm honest, I still kind of don't. However, over the near millennia of watching them at work, then I have found that they truly won't ever know what they want. They don't know how to completely trust one another. Granted, I don't believe any race truly has that potential, not even our own. If for no other reason, then the one thing that makes them unwilling to trust one another is probably why they've even survived as long as they have, Naruto responded. Grimoire narrowed his eyes for a second, but he didn't speak. Neither did Issa or Ari. As they stood in silence, no one was surprised when Naruto raised his arm and effortlessly blocked a sharp kick that was no doubt aimed to take his head off his shoulders. The ground underneath his feet cracked from the sheer pressure that no human could have done well to block again. Though then again, who Naruto had just blocked had loved kicking. Sometimes Naruto had to imagine that if Issa and the rest of his family hadn't drilled more hand-to-hand combat into her head, then this S-rank vampire would merely use kicks for everything. Glad you could make it, Mocha, Naruto replied with a small smile as the daughter of Issa Shuzen dropped to the ground. Her long, silver hair fell past her waist. She glared up at him for a second with her dark, red eyes before a small smirk appeared on her face. I tried to be as early as possible. Also forgive the blunt entrance, I just wanted to make sure you hadn't gotten weak since you've been away, sensei, Mocha said, standing to her feet. She quickly dusted off her pants before folding her arms. Issa quickly cleared his throat. Mocha, remember to be respectful, Issa warned with a small glare over his daughter's form. Mocha was ready to nod, but a hand from Naruto stopped her. It's fine, Issa. I do have to treat Mocha a little differently. She is the first person I actually decided to teach some of my demonic arts to. Granted, I know I expressly forbade her from using them if it wasn't a major issue, Naruto said with a raised eyebrow. Mocha snorted. I still remember the rule, sensei. I haven't used what wasn't needed in the first place, Mocha replied with a firm tone. Naruto glanced at her for a second before nodding. Well then, I think we should knock and say hello, Naruto said with a notion for Mocha to do as she pleased. Mika quickly stretched her legs a moment. Are you sure, sensei? You know what happened to the last group of humans I said hello to, Mocha said as she stretched one more time. Naruto effortlessly sweat dropped. He slowly nodded. Oh, he did remember that time. Trust him that he did. It was just one of the many things he and Kami got into their arguments about. Non-lethal, Mocha. Just remember that. You'll have to show some restraint, Dadbayo, Naruto said before he slammed his hand over his mouth. Naruto cursed. Looking back, he noticed Eri's eyes sparkling. Grimoire raised an eyebrow with a small smile while Issa chuckled. Mocha folded her arms. Flustered Sochi. Ari asked before Naruto snarled and pointed to the door. Just kick the damn door down already. Naruto growled much to everyone's amusement, but Mocha merely nodded and took a small step forward. She raised her foot into the air. With a sharp intact of breath, she extended her foot into the door, releasing every bit of pent-up demonic energy she held in her body as the doors exploded off their hinges and into the Wagarashi courtyard. Guards stood baffled by the display as the broken doors picked up dust. As the dust began to settle, everyone watched a young teen woman make her appearance. Her silver hair and red eyes were the most startling features to everyone there. She smirked. That smirk seemed to unravel everything as the guards shouted at one another. Man after man lined up before Mocha. They unsheathed their swords before her. One smirked. You little bitch. You're going to regret doing that. He snarled before Mocha swiped a hand through her hair. The smirk fell from her face as she snorted. HMPH scum. Know your place, Mocha said before releasing a wave of demonic pressure. By himself, one of the guards watched as his comrades fell to the ground one by one. Each dropped their swords, making their sounds of metal ringing through the compound like a song of despair and hopelessness as the men fell to the pathetic ground they walked on. Mocha looked up at the last remaining man. His hands were shaking, his form was quivering. Such an unsettling sight. Mocha smirked and charged. Near the outskirts of Tea Country, the four great Satans stood in a circle. Each knelt down to one knee. Okay, we're going to begin the process. This will take a portion of demonic energy, but if we all cooperate, then we should have no further issues. This is not the time for jokes, Seraphal, Falbium said with a small glare. Seraphal stared at her fellow Satan in shock. I know when it's time to get serious, Falbi. What do you take me for? Seraphal asked, making Falbium pinch the bridge of his nose. Sirzex chuckled, but he didn't move to reply. Neither did Ajuka. He merely shook his head. Come on, you two. We have work to do. I just felt Mocha-san's demonic energy fluctuate. No doubt Mao-sama has already started. Remember, once we begin we can't stop or we'll very well break the fabric of the dimension. No pressure, Sirzex remarked, making the others swallow the lump in their throats. Wow, that sounds like a hefty piece of information, a sudden voice suddenly said in the fields, forcing Seraphal, Falbium, and Ajuka to look up. Sirzex chuckled as he stood to his feet. In contrast to Sirzex, the three Satans glared at the individual in regular loathing. Ah, what's the matter? Why the glares? His firm voice asked as he stepped more and more into the fields. The smirk on his face seemed to irritate the three Satans more and more before Sirzex turned around. Well, the glares on my friends are only natural. You aren't one of the most respect demons, Dante-san, Sirzex said as a tall, white-haired man in a dark, red coat came forward. Behind his back laid a rather large sword. The four Satans could feel the power radiating from it, but then again they all knew who they were dealing with. Hey, I suppose that's true, but then again I don't really care to be respected by demons, the man named Dante said as he grabbed the hilt of his sword. Now why don't you all be good little brats and go back to the underworld where you all belong? If you don't, then I'm gonna have to ask all the kids to leave. It might just get M-rated here, Dante replied while Sirzex sighed. The seal doesn't need 4. You guys complete the seal. I'll handle Makai's number 1 rogue half-demon, Sirzex said with a small smirk. Dante could feel the power radiating from Sirzex's body. He carefully reached for his sword. Well, looks like the kitty gloves are coming off already. Of all the dimensions I've visited in my banishment, I have to say that I never thought in a millennia that I would be fighting you again, classmate, Dante said with a wide smile. Sirzex grinned. I'll be sure not to bore you. Oh, but before we begin, where did you get that red coat of yours? Sirzex asked. Dante blinked before he outright laughed. He clutched his stomach hard before replying. You really want to know? Come on, Satan Red. You know this isn't the only dimensions that matters in the universe. The dimensions guardians are friends of mine after all. Not even the Mao can restrict that. Coat's nice, isn't it? You have no idea how much I had to pay for this thing, Dante said, making Sirzex nod his head. The red-haired Satan smiled widely. Good. I'll have to take Graphia-chan after I take care of you, Sirzex said, making Dante's eyebrow twitch. Cheeky asshole. We'll see about that. Now if we've fulfilled our requirement for introductions, then, let's bring the house down. Dante shouted as he unclipped his sword and with great speed charged at the Lucifer Satan. Sirzex smirked as he held out his hands. Quickly a heavily dark energy encased in red energy made itself apparent. Seraphal widened her eyes while Falbium and Ajuka narrowed their own. Sirzex charged at Dante, kicking up the dust underneath his feet. Dante shouted as he held his sword overhead while Sirzex extended his hand. With a loud clash, Dante slammed his sword against Sirzex's abilities in the use of the power of destruction. As the two met, Seraphal, Falbium and Ajuka covered their eyes as a massive wave of dust came over the field. The ground beneath the Grimoire Satan and the half-demon exploded in a powerful quake of aura. In the skies above, a large demonic seal appeared. The clouds gathered and lightning flashed through the skies. The trees, one after the other, were ripped by their roots from the ground they stayed in. Sirzex's hair flapped in the wave of power before him as he smirked. Meanwhile, Dante grinned just as widely. Sirzex sighed. The only weapon that couldn't be fully destroyed by the power of destruction. That sword's name was Rebellion. Stand down, Dante-san, Sirzex demanded while Dante smirked. You know me, I've never been one to follow orders, Sirzex, Dante said. Sirzex shook his head before a dark aura covered their forms. The black, Dark skies stormed violently around the area before the arena that formed around them quickly exploded in a brutal, savage, aggressive burst of demonic prowess and mastery. Then I'll make you follow this one, Dante-san, Searzex replied. Dante snorted. You're more than welcome to try. Dante instigated.